Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Happy Tuesday.
How y'all feeling?
Happy Tuesday.
Ladies, y'all feel good? Fellas, y'all alright? Enemies, y'all good? Okay? Everybody in between. Welcome to the Queer Quarterly, the third of the year, Surviving Academia edition. As y'all may know, we gather to sit and just have some conversations about what it means to be queer in different spaces, whether it be talking about academia, talking about bar, talking about education, talking about voting, talking about the state of our health as a people. Today, I have some wonderful, wonderful panelists here with me to sit and talk about what it means to navigate academia as a queer person of color, specifically a queer person of Black experience. So I'm going to introduce them one by one. They're going to come up and join me, and y'all are going to give them a loud round like they just got their 10s at the ball, okay? Okay. So my first panelist tonight is London Pierre Williams. Now, London Pierre Williams is actually an archivist at One Hood Media, so he actually has done some work with us before. But London Pierre Williams is a alum of Carnegie Mellon University and the Kansas City Art Institute. As said by, the CMU website, London Williams is a multidisciplinary artist that navigates intersections of Blackness through masculinity and sexuality within paintings, drawings, photographs, and mixed media. His work approaches documentation of the domestic interior as a reproach of a history that has yet to be lived. So as you know, he paints. He spins. He spins on the ones and twos at sets, and he spins and dips as a father of the House of 85. So multidisciplinary is the word. And once again, welcome London Pierre Williams. So we got other panelists. Where were you earlier, actually? Where were you earlier? Because I think I did miss something. I missed one thing. Care to tell the audience?
I'm now a professor as well at the School of Art. I'll be teaching undergraduate painting. So.
Okay, so all that. So give it up for Professor Williams, okay? Now, our next panelist of the night is a alum of the University of Pittsburgh, okay? And her name is Ajani Zanaya. Ajani is an activist, a narrative strategist, and cultural curator that uses media, policy, and the arts to amplify voices and ignite change. With a background in communications rhetoric, Africana studies, and digital media, she has built a career at the intersection of advocacy, artistic expression, and community empowerment. She also continues her work to involve youth and education at every angle that she can, and she's also maybe considering going back to school, so we're going to get into that, okay? Give her another round, please. Now, our next panelist, last but definitely not least, is a doctor, a professor, okay? And she's gonna get into it with us tonight. So give a round for Dr. Professor Anya. Dr. Anya is associate professor of second language acquisition at Carnegie Mellon University. As said by CMU, Dr. Anya is a scholar of language learning and Black experiences and multilingualism. Her primary fields of inquiry include critical applied linguistics, critical sociolinguistics, and critical discourse studies, with a focus of how race, gender, sexual, and social class identities intersect with language learning. Give her a round. I'm really excited to get into it with all of you. I've chatted with y'all a bit before. This is the first, we met in a more musical sense, like Spirit Fashion Show, but I have been hit with a new push that came on Twitter, and I wanted to talk to you for like the past 2 years. So thank you again for having the time to come and join us, and thank you guys also for coming in. So if you guys want to take those mics. We only have 3 today, so I'll pass it as needed if you guys are all into it. Okay, so make sure you guys just hit that mute button and get right into it. So again, this is something light. We're not getting too stringent with everything. I just want to have a chat about some experiences. So I did tell you, the audience, about them a little bit on paper, a little elevator pitch. I do want to hear from you guys about yourself and specifically about your school. Where did you go to school? Was it public? Was it private? Just rather take us through a little bit so we can have somewhere to jump off of. Whoever wants to start. I'll just start. When she's ready, she's ready.
So, how far back you want to go? I'm almost 50 years old. Sort of K through 12, I was educated in Catholic schools. So I went to parochial schools and Catholic high schools. The first secular school I went to was university. So I did that at Dartmouth College for my undergrad. I went to Brown University for a master's, and I rounded out the PhD at UCLA. So that's my schooling.
Can you tell me what you studied during your...
Oh, of course. I began Romance languages and literatures and cultures. And also I specified a little bit more in the master's, and I did Brazilian studies in Portuguese language. And I pivoted from literature and literary studies and went into applied linguistics for the PhD. So I study how people language. I study how we language, I study what language means, symbolism of it, how people learn how to language, and very specifically I'm into how Black people language, how we can communicate across the African diaspora without the barriers of different languages, and I'm generally a loud mouth on Twitter. So that's how, if anybody knows me, usually that's how they came across. I'm actually getting into some shit today because of what I said about Hillary Clinton not being a good person. So,
Gotta be fair.
it is what it is.
Thank you. Hey, John.
So I have a background in a diverse public and private education system. So my first couple years, it was a public school that was majority funded by tax dollars. And then I went to a city school once I moved. And in that experience, my mom was like, I don't like what this is doing this year. So they opened up a private school in the inner city, and I attended there from 4th to 8th grade. So a private Christian school, literally called Logos Academy, predominantly Black and Latina students with all white staff. Then for my high school experience, I switched over to a rural white school, which led me to really experience the transition and understand systems of injustice from a private lens to a public lens, the difference between funding and how that impacts one's education, and systemic racism versus like upfront in the face. A little background about my high school experience. When I was 15, I had a moment of virality, kneeling for police brutality that essentially got me death threats, and I was 15. So being in that situation really allowed me to step into cultural organizing, reframe like how I approach including our community in these conversations, starting diversity councils in my county, and then I went to school for communications rhetoric, Africana studies, and digital media at the University of Pittsburgh. It didn't initially start in that way. I thought I was going to do pre-med, and I did some research with PitMed, the CDC. I even worked at Shadyside Hospital, and during that time, I just realized the inaccessibility of informations and the need for us to understand language being communicated with us, especially when it was surrounding our wellness. And so that is what allowed me to continue my journey. And so currently I am contemplating, I say contemplating, but I know. I'm pursuing my education further, and so we'll talk about that more.
So early on schooling for me, I spent the vast majority of my time at Montessori schools, and then would transition to charter schools before I went to a Catholic high school. Private Catholic high school was kind of how I found my way into the arts. Was able to do dance and visual arts and performing arts and all that jazz, and I kind of found a love for myself in that way. And then that would set me up to then go to the Kansas City Art Institute in Missouri, it was really like a big culture shock for me, studying the arts amongst having nothing but like white, like queer professors, or just white men and white people in general, never having had any representations for people like me to teach me about things like that, or teach me art rather. And then I would find my way to Carnegie Mellon for grad school to get my MFA. And I think like throughout all of that time, and then also something I'm forgetting. During my time in undergraduate, I was also an Andrew Mellon undergraduate curatorial fellow at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in photography. So I had both a balance of learning and making art while also studying in museums and understanding the back end about like what it is to actually like, be in a curatorial space while making work and being an artist while being a curator, like in that balance. So I've had a lot of experience with art education while also like being in multiple art spaces and actually showing work as well during my time in school. I would say that like I found myself sort of like split in these spaces where like my queerness would either be acknowledged but not my blackness, or my blackness would be acknowledged and not my queerness. And having to like kind of balance and juggle that from like an educational standpoint but also a community standpoint, as far as like the culture on my campuses, I felt like that was something that was like a huge thing that was not connected, and it honestly would affect the way that I look at my work, and the way that I make and the way that I go. So I have way more, but that's probably like a little bit set up.
Thank you all for sharing. That's a great start. And the first thing, I had one question here, but before I get into that, the first thing that jumped out to me was the spectrum of public and private. We have different experiences here. Me personally, I was in Montessori school for like pre-K, and then I was in public all the way up until CMU. So there's a lot of different spectrum of experience, and I do want to ask how you think that affected your education, but specifically how the public versus private characteristic of your school affected how you hold your queerness. And within the sense, and queerness in the sense that we're queer, but I also do note that we're also in the arts and humanities in a sense, with touching on science in a way. But I do see the humanities often being associated with queerness in a sense, and I want to know what you guys think of that as well.
So, as I said, I went to K through 12 Catholic schools. So, and while I was aware of my queerness around, let's say middle high schoolish, it wasn't something that I could safely or do or explore or even try to understand in a Catholic school setting. So that just was not a possibility for me until I got to college. And I was away from home. I was also raised in a very conservative, traditional, religious immigrant family. So my people are Nigerian and Trinidadian. I was born in Nigeria and I came to the US when I was about 10 years old. So I consider myself more American than anything else, but very strong ethnic background. And that just, in my circles, was just not happening. So my queerness didn't even become a thing until I could go away to college, literally, outside of my family home, my community environment. And I went to my first gay people's meeting at my undergraduate school, and I started to, talk to people about it and, figure out, okay, what does it mean to be a girl who likes girls. And at the time, I came into bisexuality at the time. Eventually, years on, I would realize I was a lesbian, but that's, that was my path. So the queerness definitely happened in a predominantly white institution, and being gay was white, in that this is who was at the meetings and the events that we had, and it was also a really white area. I went to school in New Hampshire, and so we had to, even to find like a gay bar or something, we had to get in a car and drive somewhere to, the largest city around, which was an hour and something away, Burlington, Vermont. So the diversity just wasn't there. So my queerness for a very long time was kind of a lonely experience in the places where I could be queer. And that was in those academic spaces, the school sort of spaces. But then when I would come home to the DC metro area, DC is an extremely black place. So I could be queer in DC when we went to clubs and things like that and experienced that life, but nowhere near my family. So the duality I was living for a long time. And it's just, my queerness was never something that was fully integrated into all aspects of my life. Until much later in my life when I was independent enough to say, okay, I'm going to be present everywhere in my fullness and my entirety, instead of splitting myself up into these spaces and these boxes depending on where I was.
I had a very similar experience, very, very similar experience. The high school I went to was Catholic high school, private. I also went to predominantly all private schools from high school to college, like all three were private schools. And I think my school, they actually had an LGBTQIA plus club that the archdiocese ended up removing because of politics within the school. So, and that was me coming in my freshman year when I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I understand where y'all stand at, with this tolerance with it. And I think that I was fortunate enough to have teachers who were acknowledging the queerness in different ways, whether it be recommending supplement material or trying to have conversations, or even when they would look at things I was interested in making. I had people, but I think for the most part I felt very isolated in those spaces, and sort of I almost felt more of a awareness to be closeted in those spaces, to kind of blend in, or to protect or survive in those spaces. I felt and then going into college, private institution in rural Missouri, no shade, and I was and a lot of times the only black queer person in my classes. I vast majority, I rarely, and so I think there was always that extra layer where I think that people had an approach to me with me being physically gay or being a butch queen or whatever, and they were able to attach to that, but not really I don't know. I felt they prioritized my queerness over my blackness, which kind of complicated things for me, because they were just really strange sort of microaggressions, or these subtleties that kind of further isolated me more. I was really finding myself in college. Moving on, I grew up in a very religious household. My mother's a minister. I come from a long line of preachers who do not play about things of that nature. And so when I went to college, that was really the time where I was able to do all the things I didn't necessarily feel like I could do, from wearing skirts to going to gay clubs to walking around holding guys' hands. I was able to exercise that there, but there was also this sort of limitation because of my blackness that was put on me in that space, and the sort of desirability politics and sort of navigating that. And I think that academia also kind of perpetuated the same things that were happening on the outside, whether it be that there weren't professors teaching me about black contemporary artists or black queer contemporary artists, all those art history courses or painting classes, and everything that I learned in that space. A lot of the time I would have to go out of my way to do the research on my own, which I was proud to do, because it's something I'm interested in, something that I feel I needed to make up for the lack of information that was being presented. But I think that I was forced to kind of make a decision in most times to balance out the two of being black and queer in those spaces. It was really odd, and I think coming to Pittsburgh, it was kind of saving grace. I was able to
queer. I just knew that I existed as other, and I felt like I was forced into what attraction was supposed to look like. My family's also fairly religious. Like, my pop-pop is a pastor. My nana, very much first lady, she had me doing mother-daughter teas. We were organizing the different church facilities and events, and early in my academic experience, it wasn't even like a question. It was just like, I'm here to learn. And coming from an environment where education was the only priority, like they would constantly drill into me, like, you don't date, you go to school. Like, so it's not even thinking about like, do I like girls or do I like boys? Like, you don't date, you go to school. And from being such a young, radical mind, and I say that very intentionally because I think it's important to acknowledge how strong I've always been in my character and in my mindset from a very young age, questioning systems and holding people accountable, and how that caused a lot of issues that it was difficult to even acknowledge the queerness of that. And I would even argue the queerness was due and survived through like my otherness. Like, I began to understand like my identity because I could understand the differences in how I was being treated. And even like to touch on the public versus private and how that impacted my education, starting off my schooling, going to a public school that was funded very well. Like, I didn't really see racism like for the first couple of years of my life. I'm like, well, we're all like kids, so we all go to school like the arts and you play, and not really picking up on the nuances of it until I had my first Black teacher. Oh my gosh, I have a whole poem about like Black teachers because of this. And that was my second grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Pagan. To this day, I have her on Facebook. Shout out to her, because I remember when she had to sit me down and tell me like about the difference, and not just in Blackness. I haven't had a queer teacher like that I openly knew was queer, and it took some time to really understand and cope with the fact of my existence and my identity, period. So if I'm already coping with like what it means to be Black, like queerness was not one of those things that was first for me. And once I switched over to a private school, 4th through 8th grade, being around predominantly Black community, being around predominantly Black and Latin community as students, but having all white teachers, those were conversations. Like, they're already very religious. We had, my friends and I joke to this day, and I don't think it's a joke, like I really do think this is for real. Like, it was like a cult. Like, Wednesdays, every Wednesday we had church. Like, mandatory church that we had to participate in, and I happily got up there and I sang, but I didn't think I really understood like the impact of what having to show up in that way was until I started hitting like 6th grade and I started asking questions and being reprimanded for it. Like, I was always a very brilliant mind from a young age, and then I was being punished for asking questions. And the very questions they taught us to critically think about. My school, being called Logos Academy, was very concentrated on logic and reasoning, and for us to decipher media and artifacts. But as soon as I practiced that against those who were teaching me, it became a problem. However, I do understand like the difference in the education system and going to private school made a valuable difference, because going to those funded schools gave me the opportunity to do ceramics and to have art classes where I was learning how to shadow and learning about different artists, but they were always like reading literature at level being trained on grammar. Like, I understand now having grammar classes every single day from 4th to 8th grade is not normal for people. And I thought that was normal for people. And how that even influenced my career to this day. Like, me getting a degree in communications rhetoric, knowing that like my background was in grammar and rhetoric is an influential experience. But really, queerness was not discussed. There was only one girl that I know who was talked about to be queer, but like it wasn't a conversation. And so, yeah, we got funded to have arts programs. We had theater programs come in. We would have a week off of school where we would have a creative project that we got to perform and do. But I didn't really identify or understand like the conversation until high school. And it wasn't that I ignored queer existence. I was actually an avid advocate. Like early on, I was an ally. What? And to the point I was getting in arguments with teachers and with my parents. So I'm like, what did gay people do? Like, what was wrong? Like, I don't understand. And then I joined the GSA. It was a Gay Straight Alliance in high school, and I was a part of that program as an ally. I was an A, I was an ally. I swore up and down, I was an ally. But it was predominantly white still. I went to a rural high school, and being a part of that community in that way allowed me to understand like the freedom of expression that is allotted to different groups of people, and how it does allow you access and insight into like what is possible. But I didn't even understand that I was attracted to women until I saw another queer Black woman. And because really all the time I was growing up with Black women in my life, but we're related, we're cousins. I wouldn't be attracted to my cousin. Like, that's weird. I'm just being straight up. I'm just being straight up. So when I really started being around queer identifying people who were people that looked like me and made me understand like, oh, like this is feelings that I have. And once I got to college, that's when I was really able to like think about it. But even like the University of Pittsburgh, I'm not gonna say as as a whole institution, but specifically like the groups that I was a part of or that I would frequent around, they were still very homophobic. We tried to start, it was called Black, Loud, and Queer. It was a organization that was meant to really highlight the intersectionality of queerness and Black identity, and it was constantly berated and disrespected. And so I really didn't even get the chance to explore that aspect of my sexuality until like really the end of college, meeting more queer people, like traveling, like me being introduced to going around, going to different countries, seeing like their ability to express themselves and honor their identity in those ways is what allowed me to become more comfortable. To the point that I was like, oh, yeah, just call me queer. Like, I don't need the label, queer is fine for me. I like who I like, but I don't think I would have got there if I didn't have the representation that I needed to see.
I wanted to also address the public-private, but then also the institutional type. So I was educated throughout my life in private schools. However, with my choices, I have two children that are my biological children and one stepdaughter. So the children that I've raised so far, a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old, I've sent them to public schools throughout. So they've been traditional publics, charter schools as well, and we've opted for charter when we needed like bilingual schools or language concentrations and things like that. So I am extremely invested in public education, especially at the K-12 level. And even in my work as a professor, I'm a professor of teachers, in that I work in language education and teaching language teachers how to teach language and doing research about how people experience language learning. So it's very important for me, the idea that we all pay for public education as taxpayers and we deserve deserve quality public education. We should be very highly invested in it. And I am in it to the skin. And I also want to say that my undergraduate education was at a small liberal arts college. And that makes a really big difference, right? A lot of people go to larger institutions, highly research concentrated institutions, and that was not my experience, especially as an undergraduate. And my undergraduate education was the most formative of my entire educational career. And it was because it was liberal arts, it was because it was a general education curriculum, in that while we had our majors, the idea was that you had to take classes in everything to get a well-rounded understanding of things. And you had to understand critical thinking, you had to do a lot of writing as well, as the focus is in liberal arts. And this is very important for me, dealing with queerness, or having to do with queerness, because it was in my undergraduate education at a liberal arts college where I started to read feminist theory and queer theory. And back in the 90s, we're trying to figure out, okay, what's women's spaces? What does it mean to have feminist politics? What does it mean to have woman-oriented politics? And also womanism. What does it mean to be a black woman and do feminism as a black woman? And so much so that we have to kind of have our own type of feminism because we know that traditional feminism is not intersectional. So I wanted to highlight that education and type of education, type of institution, they really all do make a difference in the way that we school and we experience whatever we experience in our formative years in these institutions.
Thank you for that. You definitely comprehensively encompassed a lot of what all three of you guys are talking about, with how it does have a lot of positive and negative experiences, but it's just formative. And speaking of formative, I do, for a second, you mentioned Miss Pagan.
Miss Pagan, that's my girl to this day. She responded to my messages. I love her.
Yes, who was that teacher for y'all? It doesn't have to be queerness. It could be about, we're in surviving, we're in queer quarterly, so it could be about queerness. We're at one hood, so it could be about blackness. It's about surviving academia. It could be about just what you were studying. Who was that teacher for you? And how do you, as an educator, people involved in education now, how do you channel that teacher?
I have a couple. So Mrs. Pagan was obviously, that's second grade, that's early. She set the tone. Following that, the teachers that I honestly have been really supported by have been white males, white men, in literature specifically. Let me clarify. I had two high school teachers, Mr. Harrigan. He was my 9th grade teacher for English. That was when I was just in regular old English. And after that, he was like, I think you should consider honors. And really challenging my mind to go beyond. Because once I switched from private school to public school, they try to play me. They try to put me on all regular classes. Your girl isn't, not to say regular classes are bad, let me specify. But the education that I came in with, it was they were trying to dumb me down, purposefully. Having me take these placement tests, randomly last minute. I'm all startled, I'm coming in, this is new for me. And you're oh, take a test, and we can see where you go. This is my first day of school, let me chill for a second, let me get accustomed. And I feel that scenario with him really supporting me and challenging me to go further helped, because then he ended up becoming my 11th grade AP English and composition teacher. And that was so valuable for me because we really got into language as an art. Where do you need to put punctuation? Why does syntax matter? How do you express your ideas to the fullest extent that it becomes your voice? Not you trying to speak like someone else, but like you. And then right after that, Mr. Weaver, my 12th grade English teacher, they were buddies, obviously. This is the same school. And he, I forget what the name of the course was, but it was an AP English course. I ended up getting a 5 and a 4 on my assignments. So I tested out of English for college. Like I didn't have to take English class. And really like their ability to personalize the experience and make it culturally relevant for everyone, I admire. Like for them to be white men who went out of their way to find paths within the curriculum and then expand it to different identities was transformational. And I do have to understand that as a privilege, because to be in a rural public school in high school, and you have these 2 white men who are like, okay, we're going to teach you how to write, we're going to teach you how to read very well, we're going to analyze a letter from, oh my gosh, why can't I say it right correctly? The letter from Birmingham jail. He had my white class analyzing this. I was like, how? And it wasn't that I didn't think we shouldn't. It was just that I didn't see people go out of their way. Like we were reading stories about native reservations, and just the way that like they included that was definitely transformational into how I viewed literature and my ability to love writing, to the point that like I ended up winning like the English Department Award for high school, and I was shocked because to me I wasn't the best writer in the school. I didn't come from like all of this professional training that a lot of the other students had, but because they kept investing in me, to the point like I was depressed in high school. Like if you got a whole bunch of death threats constantly and you have people in your class who just hate you because of how like you show up in the world, you're gonna be a little depressed too. And they would come to me and be like, hey, like what's going on? Talking to me, like really like being invested in my education, and I really value that, and I take that on now. And I honestly missed it, like in university, because I went like right before COVID hit. COVID had not allowed me to really formulate relationships with my professors. And I understand like how valuable it is to be able to connect with a professor, to have someone who's invested in your growth, to have someone who's really like passionate about what they do so much that they see, I don't even want to say see beyond culture, they go and search for it. Like they are really I can't even think of the verbiage at the moment, because I feel like it's just like a feeling like you have. And you have to really yearn to want to know more about your craft so much that you are looking for it at all corners of the earth, and not just within what you learned at home, but like searching for it beyond like what you may have even imagined, and then taking it back to your students. And that's how like I approach learning now. That's how I approach teaching now, and even speaking life into others. And you have to really, when you have the attention of impressionable minds who are looking for more, you have to know like you can't teach them everything, so giving them the tools to be able to guide themselves down that path is essential.
I have 2 professors in mind, but I'm really struggling with this question because I think that like if I'm being like completely honest and transparent, there's no professor that like I honestly want to like embody completely or like to like follow. I think that there are hints in like different techniques that they use that I admired and helped me. But 2 professors that really in my undergraduate, Corey Dances, who was my undergraduate sophomore painting professor, had a profound impact on my life as a painter, as an artist and creator and a thinker. I took his class out of a desire to critically think about painting, and although this was a white passing, like a Mexican man who understood like his placement in the world, understood, or at least tried to understand my placement. I remember we had a studio visit where we were having a conversation and we were talking about like Trayvon Martin and like having like this conversation about like what it means to like get pulled over. It's really weird, but I could understand like what this sort of like care along with the academics, which I found really helpful in thinking about. Oh my God, sorry. Yeah, like just like placement, and then in graduate school, Katie Hubbard, who was my first year advisor and also my director by the time I would graduate, who kind of like, I've never seen a professor who is so compassionate and so like willing to meet their students so individualized, like to have such a personable connection with the students, to really understand their mind and care about exactly what it is that they want to make and do in the world. And I think that I've had very sustaining like conversations about queerness and navigating that in the art world, but also in academic space in general. Like I feel like her placement in my life at the time that it was very intentional and was kind of divine order, I would argue. But I think that like, and I said this prior, like earlier, that like I had no like black professors or queer-facing black professors at all. And that for me, like I sort of like internalized that because I think that like when we travel in these spaces, I think there's subtle ignorance that some professors may have that they don't realize, and perpetuating things onto their students, which was something that like I faced a lot throughout my time in undergraduate and graduate school. I don't want to like, I'm not gonna out this professor, but there was a professor that kind of was like the antithesis of like what I needed at the time. Someone who I deeply admired and was one of the reasons why I chose the program that I like went into. And this is one of the things where like be careful who your heroes are, or be careful when you meet your heroes. This professor I was like so excited to like work with, and I was completely defeated when I had interactions with this person because they were just so jaded by the system that they had been in. And I think that there was like this sort of like hopelessness for like black queer individuals that traversed into like predominantly white institutions. And so I think that like for me, as I am going to become a professor really soon, I was really reluctant prior to this to becoming a professor because I didn't want to be that for students. I had spent so many years dealing with teachers who clearly were not invested in their jobs, who didn't really care about teaching. They were doing it as a means to like make the money to get their work out, so like, you know, their heads were never really in it. And not saying that was my experience with every professor, but for a vast majority of them, it was a motive. And I think that like it's mad important to like, you're dealing with people who are, you're dealing with students, young minds that are vulnerable and that are coming to a space to learn and to grow and to like go out into the world. And I think that like as professors, as teachers and educators, we have a responsibility to help navigate and guide those students. And everything that like we do, from showing up to the first day to like the individualized care and consideration for these students, that all matters. And I think that I want to be what I didn't have, what I needed. And meaning like, you know, how invested can I be with my students, while also like sharing my experiences and sharing things that like I had to go through, or like, you know, trying to produce a type of education that necessarily wasn't something that like trying to fill in the halls basically. You know, I can't solve everything, but I do want to do better than the professors that I had and the teachers that I had. That's my goal, is to create an environment for students to really blossom and to find ways to individualize that for those students. I really want to care about my class, especially it's my first one, so I'm really excited about that. But I think that like, I want to show up for students the way that my professors didn't show up for me. Even if that means going on our way to find something in the material, like doing research on things that I have no clue about. I think that that's important. Like, and it's a responsibility. We're shaping young minds, so.
Influential teachers in my life. Let's see. My grammar teacher, Ms. Rogers, in 5th grade, was extremely influential in the sense that she challenged me. And she taught me sentence diagramming. I did not know that eventually in linguistics, you know, doing trees would be very critical. But more influential than she was in high school when I met Mrs. Kelly, who used the words Catholic feminist together I'm like, what now? I never understood that those two things could match. I never understood that feminism could exist within Catholicism, or women could, be into women's rights and promote women's rights in such a patriarchal religious environment. That certainly was not my experience in how people did religion in my family and my communities. Today I'm an atheist. I've been so for 20 years, but I was raised by Catholics and educated by Catholics, and they formed the core of my intellectual being and the way I thought and how I reasoned. So I'm still in conversation all the time culturally with Catholics, and I have a deep respect for women like Mrs. Kelly, who call themselves Catholic and feminist, however contradictory that may be, and she remains very impressive in my mind. In high school, of course, my Spanish teacher, Ms. Lopez, was in language classes were my forte, so I was teacher's pet through and through those classes, and I gave the same amount of love back. My English teacher, literature teacher, Mr. Seal, was very influential in my life, and I adored him and just fawned over him and stuck to every word he said until Toni Morrison won the Nobel Prize. So this was back in the 90s, I think 94. I was already in my junior year, which was my senior year because I had skipped a grade. And Mr. Seal said when Toni Morrison won the Nobel Prize that, it was so nice. This was in our English literature class, an AP literature class, that it was so nice that she won, but there are some suspicions that maybe it was because she was black. And because, people felt that a black woman had not won, and it was the time. And that, I cannot describe disappointment to you, in hearing those words, especially from somebody that I had admired for and just deeply loved, in whatever capacity I had as a 16, 17-year-old. So, I was really touched by when you said be careful of making your heroes out to be too perfect, because they do eventually disappoint. Really deeply influential teachers for me came in college, right? When I was engaging with professors as adults. And Dr. Shelby Grantham, my English, my first year English writing, your first year you have to take these composition classes. And she was the first composition instructor that I had. And she gave me the first C I ever got in my life. I nearly died. I was so upset. I was angry. I confronted her. I wanted to know why. And she very patiently during office hours sat down and told me why, and engaged with me. She was a fearsome woman. She was a white lady from Mississippi. And she had really deeply held liberal politics. She would go protest all the time. She had bumper stickers all over her car. And it was just white lefty. She was the embodiment of that. And she lived her politics as well. She was also the mother of a black child. She had adopted a black girl. And after, I was her student, I was no longer her student, she invited me into her home because she felt, we're living in New Hampshire. Her black child doesn't see black people. She needed support with doing the girl's hair. And she wanted to pay me to babysit and, just hang out and be a company to the family, and that's how we became close. She became an example to me, not just in teaching, in fierce intellectualism, but also in motherhood. She was the first person, the first household I was in where they didn't beat children. And this was remarkable for me. It might be ordinary for some of you here, but a house where you don't spank the kids was something I had never seen before, never experienced before. And she was very patient in how she explained to me how you can raise children without violence. And I learned that from her. So I didn't just learn, schooling from her and intellectualism from her. I learned humanism from Shelby Grantham. And she will always be my most endearing example of a teacher, a mother, a leftist white lady, and a generally really good person. May she forever rest in peace.
Shout out to the educators. I'm gonna add my because you guys touched me. And I didn't add at the beginning that you can't say NA because there doesn't have to be an answer. I didn't have it myself. The only one that I had was actually my mother, who was an English teacher. started school teaching at East Side Academy on Rikers Island.
Wow.
Okay. But I do want to ask, I have two questions on topic on, I think I'm going to get to this first, because y'all are some high achieving folks. I hear grades are being skipped, national awards are being had, high school subject awards and all this, multiple degrees being considered. And I want to know how your thoughts on that growing up, for the better or worse, how that was perceived and treated. Was your high achievement, to what extent was your high achievement embraced? And to what extent was it misreported? And to what extent were those holes in your high achievement, if they existed, the focus?
I think I'm going to talk about this. So I come from a high achieving family, so it was expected, high achieving in terms of formal education. There were problems in my family like any other, and some of us didn't do as well in life, if you will. But it was expected that we went to school, it was expected that we got degrees, it was expected that we entered into some sort of professional vocation. We were lawyers and architects, mostly. I was the first teacher, and eventually professor. So that wasn't, the expectation wasn't a problem in the house, and there was no incongruence in my household between what I was doing educationally and what was happening at home. It was the path that was for all of us. I experienced problems in people's expectations, low expectations of me and what I should do and how I should be and how I should move in the academy, and especially in the field that I chose. So, and particularly when I went into languages and language learning and linguistics, which is a field here in the US where Black people are very sorely underrepresented and excluded, and there's just a deep systemic racism in my particular field that I have made an entire career of ending this plague of us always being the only ones in the room. So a lot of the work that I do is training Black people in language sciences and linguistics and world language teaching and learning, training Black students, doctoral students, and also teachers to occupy those spaces and doing the kind of research that's been ignored in my particular field. You know, it was, they called it an honor that I wrote in 2017, the first book that critically engaged and specifically focused on Black students in world language learning and did a critical examination, discourse analysis, all of that. And it was embarrassing to me because it was 2017. Why was this the first? And it just led me to always write about this exclusion. And very recently with Tasha Austin, my African-American colleague from SUNY Buffalo, we made a call for Black linguistic reparations in our field and talked about the harm that has been done in the field of languages against Black people, specifically African Americans, and how we should go about, repairing this harm and making restitutions and ultimately reparations. So not only did I live this racism, this exclusion, this loneliness of always being the only one, I made it my life's work to make sure that people in the future, Black people in the academy who choose, make sure that they know that it's an option to choose this field and that they're not the only ones, and they're able to have students and inspire students and build up this pipeline from which, quite frankly, we've been excluded.
Just reflecting on your status of being a high achiever relative to others, to what extent was that embraced in your education coming up, and to what extent was it misreported, misacknowledged, or just straight up combated?
I would first like to state, because I don't think I set the tone on this, but I'm a first generation college student, and that is a very big deal for me. On both sides of my family, actually. So that is why they went so far. That is why they said, you're not dating. Like, you date the looks. Like, you're going to school. You're going to college. Like, that wasn't an option. Like, that wasn't a discussion. That was an expectation. And also to provide another layer of it, just so it really hits you, I'm also the first woman in my family to make it this age without kids and to live by myself. So me going to school was really like breaking a generational curse. It was establishing a standard of what is possible beyond like the limitations that were set. So I just want to set that tone real quick, and now we're going to wind it back a little bit. Because growing up in this predominantly white spaces that I did, I really didn't understand the differences, like I said, like early on, until I was actively being met with racism, like in my face, undeniable injustice. And I was one of those kids, like I was outspoken about it. You know, I treat me like this? What's going on? Hold up. You said that you was going to do this, but now you didn't do this, and now getting me in trouble. But some of the things that I specifically think about when we talk about misrecorded, like not documented, and to this day I have beef. Like to this day I have beef, and I'm going to say it like this because Logos Academy, I need reparations. I was in 6th grade. I probably could have skipped grades. Like I'm not even going to like sugarcoat it, because I was constantly being written up for talking in class. Now, yeah, I was talking in class because I was done my work. I'm over here chatting to the people next to you, trying to teach them how to do the work so we can move on. I'm over them. And then by the time that they're done, now we're all chatting because the work is done. If the whole class is not moved on, that's not my problem. At least that's how I felt. Or put me in a harder class. And I was one of those students who advocated for myself, put me in a harder class. It took about 3 appeals to get put in a higher math placement class. So I remember being in the 6th grade, and the way that they did school in our private school, like you moved up with your grade every year. So it wasn't unheard of for people to skip grades, but apparently it was for Black people or little Black girls like me, because I didn't see many people skipping grades that was like me. And I had this teacher, you know who you are, she hated me. And I say that very intentionally because I could tell she did not like me. Like, she did not like me. She was my math teacher, and growing up, math was my favorite subject. Like, I didn't even start out as like a humanitarian girl. I was very much math science core. And so I so badly wanted to learn algebra. I'm tired of what we're learning in class. I'm ready to move forward. And the rest of my class was still stuck in these problems, and I was always the person raising my hand, and she was just like, give someone else a chance. Like, it's not my fault, I know the answer. And so that became like a weaponized against me. And so it took so much for me to advocate just to be bumped up that grade, that once I was bumped up the grade, and that's why I said I got beef with y'all, and I need y'all to really reflect on this, because when I say this, we're all gonna collectively understand how messed up it is. So once they did move me up a grade, I was 7th grade, I was in the 7th grade math class. Mind you, yes, they have all of them take the classes together. So if I was a 6th grader taking math with the 7th graders, what happened to my schedule? Why did I have a study hall in 6th grade? And you know what they had me doing for that study hall? Community service, volunteer work. And I didn't understand it to be an issue at the time because I grew up in the church. I always do community service every Saturday. But it didn't hit me until later that you had me doing unlawful child labor. I was cutting box tops. I don't even know if y'all remember what box tops were. That's how schools got funding. Like when you bought your cereal and then they had the little coupons on it and you had to organize them. I organized them for the entire school. I was helping lunch ladies prepare our lunch. That is messed up. And I think about that and the time that could have been spent on my education that was missed out on. All because you didn't want to bump me up a grade, because I was a quote unquote defiant kid. And my defiance came from my willingness to confront and hold systems accountable. So ultimately, that's punishment. When you think about the school to prison pipeline, that is an example directly. You got me over here serving lunch, and shout out to the lunch ladies because I actually really did enjoy the experience because I was a kid. But like now when I think about it, you'd rather see me serving people rather than to get my education. Rather than moving up. It got to the point that my mom took me out of the school. That's why we ended up moving, going to this other school. And when it came the time for me to move, I was on a partial scholarship for my private school. So when it came time to move, they wanted to give me a full ride. I had little cousins that went to my school. My mom adopted, just to give some context. So she had to pay for all of us to go to school. So they only wanted to offer me a full ride. Oh, she can still come. So my mother was like, why would she go here when y'all clearly don't want her? You calling me every week talking about how she's a disruption to class. You're calling me every week saying that she's causing issues because she's asking too many questions, so why should she stay here? And that is when I really understood how much they were stifling my growth in order to raise their numbers. My grades raised the numbers for the class so that they could get more funding. And that is messed up. And so when you're in these spaces of academia that are utilizing it, they treat you like a number, they treat you like profit, and they are not actually invested in your growth. You have to be willing to advocate on the behalf of yourself so much that you may be alienated. And so oftentimes the growth of my education cost me isolation. That's why those teachers who came and really invested into me and checked up on me meant so much to me, because oftentimes I didn't have that support. I'm going back home doing schoolwork. I don't have tutors. I don't have the money for tutors. And I can't ask my family because they haven't even learned what I'm learning right now. And so I just think about what could have been, as much as I appreciate where I am now. But I think about what if I was invested in for my actual merit, rather than them just getting more scholarship dollars, or them getting more funding. Because now when you look at that school, that private school, it's 50 to 60% white. So how do we go from a predominantly Black and Latino school to 60% white in 10 years? When we think about who's investing in communities early on and how people create plans, like they plan 50 years ahead to kick us out. But you're capitalizing off of my creativity, my intellect, my contribution. And I wasn't paid. So telling me I had to do community service hours, and I never even got the service hours papers, I can't even claim that. So that's one example. And then I think, let's get to college. And being in predominantly white spaces and my intellect constantly being questioned. I used to think I had like I really removed it out of my vocabulary. Like that's how strong I feel about it. Like when you go into a space and they say that you're supposed to feel like less than imposter syndrome. No, I don't think her no more. It's really you're less than. And to be in the spaces where I have labs, and I am a little sad about this, but I ended up dropping out of my chemistry class because it was a difficult class, don't get me wrong. The teacher wasn't really teaching the way I needed her to teach. It was my freshman year, but specifically my lab, we had to get partnered up. Nobody wants to partner with me. Every time we have biology, chemistry classes, or we have to get into groups, nobody wants to partner with me. No one wants me to be in their group. But specifically my lab partner, and you know who you are because I ran into you a year ago and I confronted you. She tried me. I remember we had to calculate our labs, and it's math. I already told y'all, I'm a math girl. I went all the way up to calculus. So I was like, yeah, the math is wrong with this. This is the number I got. Oh no, you gotta calculate it again. Oh babe, I did. I calculated it 3 times because I thought maybe, I really wanted to agree with you, but it just wasn't right. And that's okay, we can learn. And she refused to accept that I was right. She went around the whole lab. What number did you get? What number did you get? Can you do the math for me on here? And everybody had the same number that I had. I just want to, because being in those spaces and constantly being challenged in a way that's not actually facilitating growth, but attempting to diminish your existence, that breaks you down. Like, it really does something to you if you don't have a space and an outlet to receive more support and to stand in, like, your intellect. And I say all this to say, going to predominantly white institutions that did not prioritize and include, actually include diverse thinking and really challenging people to examine their own bias has been the most disrespectful and debilitating part of my education. And that is why I go so hard. That is why I do what I do. Because I didn't even want to go to PWI, I'm gonna be very frank. I would not have chosen Pitt. Like, if you want to get into academia and like a real conversation, Pitt wasn't even my top 5. It wasn't even my top 10. It wasn't even a thought. And I visited over 50 colleges throughout my high school experience because I was a part of a prep program where we would travel to schools. I wanted to go to a more diverse school. I really wanted to go to like an HBCU, but some of them didn't have the programs that I wanted to do. And I knew like this type of environment I needed to be in, but because I came from a low income family, I wasn't trying to take on a whole bunch of debt. And so when Pitt came in and they're like, oh, like we'll practically pay you to go to school, why would I not take that offer? And it's systems knowing that they have this influence who prey on these groups of people, because then they repeal the very programs, scholarships, and investments that brought you here in the first place. I wrote a whole college essay about race, and now you tell me you don't want me to talk about race on campus? Make it make sense. And so, yes, I mean, that's a long way to say that white supremacy and colonial thought has been the downfall of my education system. Not being able to really converse with diverse minds. And when I say diverse minds, I don't just mean Black. I mean in general. Not being able to really converse with diverse minds, like in an academic space and institution, has really limited like what is possible for growth and development intellectually. And so I appreciated like being able to be a part of programs, fellowships, and cohorts like after my degree or during my degree, like receiving that outside of that specific like academy or university, like that's really getting the depth of learning, because the women, yeah, they.
Don't be sorry.
Apologize.
I grew up, just for context, in a single parent household. I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, and my mom did not play about my education. But it also was something like she never really had to say to me. It was just something like excellence was just automatically like a thing. Like it was never something that was negotiable. I knew that like I went through high school with the 3.8. If I got any lower than a B, I was already like on edge. My mom never checked my grades. At some point, like parent-teacher conferences weren't a thing because my teachers were like, girl, like your kid is like fine. Like he's doing more than enough. Like you have a well-rounded like child this way. But I think that like I performed like that in a way to achieve something more. My mother is also one of the only people in my family to have graduated from college prior to myself, and she set the tone for me. Like I knew that like for the things that I wanted to do, or things I wanted to accomplish, I needed an education to like open up those doors, and so that was kind of always a given. But what I will say is that like achievements for me, this may sound a little like weird, but I think that like I'm a bit desensitized to it, or to like the level of achievements that I've had, and I think it's because of the things that have happened in institutions and outside of it. When I went to school, I was like, no one else in my family chose to go to art school. A lot of people would make side comments to my mother and be like, you're letting your son do that. Like, he's not gonna have an actual career. There's nothing that's gonna come from it. My mother, very grateful, was never on the side of like trying to persuade me to do something else. She was very much here for me to follow exactly what it is that I wanted to do, and I appreciate the support that like, she provided me in that time. And navigating those spaces, I performed. I have high expectations for myself in those spaces. I had high expectations for the work that I was doing, and just wanting to do more. I think that I found that in college, that with the accolades and sort of like opportunities that came in, that there was always, I didn't want to rest on those because they always didn't feel real. And I think like after my first year in college, going back home, there was this sort of weird inferiority complex that my family started to develop because I came back with all this articulation. I explained to my parents and my family what pronouns were, or at least how pronouns are used as identifying people. And I think I had a conversation with my mother where we were critically engaged, I guess in a sense critically engaging with politics, and you can't say things like that. You can't I hear you, but you can't you have to unlearn. And so my mother made a comment to me of, you think because you went to this fancy school that you know things and trying to humble. And I think I was confused just because of you've achieved this too. You've gone to school, you graduated with your master's as well. You've traversed not the same waters but similar. And I think something that ran parallel to me while I was in school was, I achieved a lot. I was given awards in school, in college. I would have opportunities that would set me up to continue things in my future. And I had students who were very butthurt about it. Comments about you deserve an A in this class, but why didn't I get one? Students be like, oh well, you kissed this professor's ass all semester, so you obviously they're gonna give you these grades, or oh yeah, you're the only black gay one in here, so they're gonna give you a little bit more special treatment. They're gonna give you these sort of things, or they're gonna give you more because you're disadvantaged in this way. So I think that having I think for me, I don't put the weight of the world in the man's hands. I don't really want to rely on the trophies and the sort of things that I think I'm just more so concerned about what I'm doing with my legacy and with my work, and how I'm making that. Those for me are my achievements. Those are for me my accolades that mean the most, when I can see the impact of the things that I'm interested in, the research that I develop. And I think that I'm not as, yeah, so the thing about being desensitized. I think that for me, I don't really I it's hard for me to take a compliment, and it's hard for me to like really like. I think even like graduating from CMU, my family did not attend none of my thesis shows or like have any of my gallery shows at all. And I think for me, it took me for a while. And I had this conversation with you the other day. That like it feels unreal about a lot of the things that I've done. Like it doesn't feel like it actually happened. I think it's because of the people that have raised me and have grown with me don't really acknowledge it. And so for me, that like, you know, these achievements only go so far, and I think that it really is about the work that like I put into it, and the things that, how much I pour into like making these things happen, or finding opportunities, or like continuing to push on and to keep pushing myself. So yeah, I don't want to give achievement so much weight. I'm grateful and for where I am and where my placement is and what I'm doing, but I think that like for me, my achievements don't make me who I am.
Can I comment on that real quick? I really respect it because when you grow up in certain environments that either they haven't been in the same position as you and they can't acknowledge, or like sometimes they can't fathom where you've been, there also is like this indoctrination of like, it can be difficult also to see where you're going. Like it can be difficult to like create that path for you. And I feel similarly sometimes about my accomplishments. Like people are like, why don't you ever talk about like the things that you've done? And because to me it's like, well, they're done. I already did them. We're on to the next thing. And when you are participating in a society that does not always award you for the things that you've done, because you might have to work a little harder or do more, that's what they want to say. And I mean, like I say that's what they want to say because in an aspect it's true, but it's also like how much we hold them to that standard of it. Like you have to really stand up for yourself. And so like acknowledging like your accomplishments is important, and it doesn't always have to be a title of it. It doesn't always have to be a nomination and an award. Sometimes it is completing a goal that you set for yourself, and that makes a difference. Those trophies are not going to keep you warm at night. Like, I'm gonna be real. And especially after graduating, I have accomplished a lot, and I can say that very confidently. Like, between the awards that I've received and between like the research opportunities that I had, but they still were trying to underpay me. And I want to sit that one right there. They still may try to play in your face despite your accreditation. But do you have the award of self-advocacy? And do you have the recognition of who you are to stand on business with the institutions and the systems that academia praises but won't acknowledge you? And I really want you to think about that, because as you pursue your degree or pursue academia and whatever right it is, you have to be willing to really stand up, because they want to stifle you, they want to quiet you so that they can keep the system going. Don't let the system keep going.
I'm gonna throw a cog in the system's wheel right now. I would like to lean some weight onto y'all for a moment. So if I could implore you, trouble you, let us know what are some of the things you've done. What are your most recent publications, your most recent showings? Where are you outside? Just list it off, let a couple go. I wanna go down the line. Because I know you all have something. I got your recent publications here, I got your shows here, I got your stuff here. So make it plain.
Let's see. Over the course of my career in academia, I've been the recipient of about $500,000 in grants. So I, which it may not be a lot for people in the sciences or something, but I am in social sciences and humanities. And so that's something that I'm very proud of. Most recently, I I was a recipient of the Mellon Foundation U Directions fellowship that came with the $270,000 grant. I was a Duolingo research fellow recently. I've won teaching awards, so the proudest honors I've had have been those that honored what I do in the classroom. Research is wonderful, but I'm in this for students and for teaching, so much so that I teach teachers. My first job after my PhD was at USC, and I won the teaching award there. And the job after that was at Penn State, and I won the teaching award there. I try to be that professor that people remember, and that really center students in my work and in the classroom, and try to do the kind of work that students are happy and excited to be a part of. And hopefully CMU will go for the teaching award here too. So that recent publications, well, actually, yeah, I made tenure recently.
Congratulations.
So I did make tenure last year, so that was great. And I didn't, just give us back to that. Still publishing. And I'm really excited that I have publications coming out with my graduate students, that I co-wrote with them. Instead of being sole author now, it's my place to nurture our upcoming scholars and collaborate with them in their writing, and so that's cool too.
Ajani, where are you at? What's happening? What you doing?
And this is a part of the problem when I said, it could just be difficult to remember the things that you do. Because this has been a very big year for me, in terms of just, participation. So I gotta start like that.
Take us for the journey.
I was about to say, I might have to just take you to the journey and name it like that. So, like I told you, I had won my English department award for high school. So then freshman year, I said I got a research internship with Pitt Medicine. That led me to a internship my sophomore year with the CDC and the Johns Hopkins Kennedy Krieger Institute studying maternal health. From there, that's when I was like, oh, actually, we're pivoting. We're going to do communications advocacy. And I ended up doing a fellowship here with London Media, which really opened me up to just being more diverse in how I approach my work. So I started working with indie arts and arts advocacy, and I ended up getting a fellowship with the Future is Black, which is one of the partnerships here, along with a national, it was the Pittsburgh Public Theater. They were partnering with the national, gosh, let me say it wrong. I'm so sorry, y'all. It's the American Theater magazine. It's a national magazine, so I was in the journalism cohort for that. And I got some honorable mention awards for my artwork around the city of Pittsburgh. I ended up being, now it's it's going to me. I gotta bounce around now, my bad. I was a recipient of the STEAM Symposium workshop facilitator, so I got to teach a workshop to students in STEAM, really emphasizing the arts. So I did a digital narrative workshop, and that was really nice. That was because I kept saying, oh, I really want to give back and teach students how to use tools, and so getting my start in there led me to job with the PA Legislative Black Caucus in Harrisburg. So like, I'm working with two government officials. That was real cute. That was real cute. And quite frankly, I know I'm missing stuff because I always do. Oh, I got an award for Keepers of the Flame, and that really touched my heart because that was with the Legacy Arts Project, which is a Afro movement collective here in Pittsburgh, and essentially, like, the award is to honor people who are continuing the legacy of Africana stories. And so since I studied Africana studies, like that, I didn't know, like they just emailed me and they're like, hey, you've been nominated for this, and that really touched my heart, like being recognized and for my work within the community was a big deal for me. And then something I always forget to mention, because it was so long ago, but like people were always like, so it's not an award, but it's just like media coverage. So yeah, I talked about like the whole kneeling thing and how that like gave me some virality. But then in 2020, I was asked to essentially question Trump about COVID-19. So that was like a very interesting experience that also assisted in like my pivot between health and communications, because at that time I was working in the hospital. So like 2020, they're like, oh yeah, like do you have a question for Trump? And they flew me out to Philly. It was with ABC Network, and it wasn't guaranteed that your question was going to be asked. So the fact that I got there, and I'm just like, yeah. So why did you downplay the coronavirus and it's known to disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities? And he over here looking at me and I'm looking at him, and I remember I was so hard, and I was like, I don't like your answer. But just being able to be a part of like communities, doing more speaking engagements, some of like my accolades aren't necessarily awards, it's really like opportunities that I receive. I get a great bit of freelance work, getting to teach workshops, getting to do speaking engagements, hosting panels, and really like putting myself out there has been like a very great reward and award, because being from a small town, I'm from York, Pennsylvania, it's 30 minutes from Harrisburg, very like rural city, county type situation. You didn't see people like me doing stuff, like quite frankly. And if they did, they never came back. And I feel them on that, because I might go back, do a little speech, but I'm not in the interest of moving back to my hometown, because there's nothing there. Like it's like one of those places where people get stuck. And so to be someone who went from that to like now I travel and I do those speaking engagements, like it's really changed my mind. And then like my one accolade I want to give myself is that I be traveling. I be outside. But quite frankly, one of the things that saved me in my academic journey, I was very depressed. Like 2020, COVID was hitting. It was like after the whole thing with Trump, and I just didn't know like what direction I wanted to go to. So I went on a solo trip to Mexico. Now, I don't necessarily like advocate for someone to go to Mexico by themselves at 20. I had a great time. I did, but like that really like led me down like a path of exploration and cultural immersion. And since then, I've been to about, I want to say 7 different countries. And yeah, and now I've been like doing a tour around the US because I'm just interested in learning about different communities and like understanding like what is going on, how do they approach arts and cultures, like what makes them passionate, what allows them to participate in wellness, and that has directly impacted like how I will be pursuing my studies moving forward. But shout out to me, because that's been self-funded, and to really go out here and to demand like my worth is the biggest reward I could have. Like I see people constantly settling. And it's quite unfortunate because there are times where you are going to have to sacrifice and grieve a part of you that thought would exist that doesn't like that isn't now. Like I thought I don't know what I thought I was gonna be right now, like maybe like a corporate daddy, like, you know, with my 6-figure salary, like doing something. I don't know what I thought I was gonna be doing. But like to really be able to cultivate like my life for myself has been like one of the greatest accomplishments of my life.
Okay, so I'm just gonna try and do my greatest hits. Yeah, it is kind of, and I don't know how far to go back, but I'm just gonna go from high school up until like graduate school, so we can stick there. So, graduating from high school, I was a recipient of a National Scholastic Art and Writing Award. Your girl was in a national exhibition, first out the gate, graduating from high school. In undergraduate, I received Emerging Artist Awards, but 2 Emerging Artist Awards, while also receiving some other like local awards in Kansas City and within like the institution. Okay, now we got that out of the way. Fast forward graduate school. I became one of the 2025 artists for one bed. I also am a recipient or previous resident at Rhabb Arts. I was awarded a Pittsburgh Foundation grant through Advancing Black Arts. In the last couple of years, I've been in 2 shows in New York. I currently right now have a solo show right now at Yosemite Gallery in Chelsea. I was also featured this year in a new American painting exhibition as well. I think I'm blanking on Massachusetts is where that show is. I'm sorry, I'm blanking. And then I'm also included in the New American Painting graduate publication that will be out in the next month or so. Yeah, I think that's. Oh, as well as.
US.
No, you haven't only shown in the US. What country?
This is why you have great people behind you. I've also shown internationally as well. I have worked shown in China, and I have been in a few traveling exhibitions. I've also been featured in the American Oxford magazine as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think you were featured in that billboard in Times Square in 2027. But 2027. But to that point, again, I just want to. This is not me finishing. We'll do a time check. But I want to thank you again for all the work that you guys do, whether you consider it work or not. I gave you a little bio intro, but don't for a second think that this should be abnormal. Listing off what you have done, because you do the do, and it is impressive, and we need to hear what you do. Like, you guys do not understand how much that is needed, but you do. But before I get into the next question, because I do have some specific stuff. Can I get a time check? What time is it, y'all?
7:45.
7:40. Okay. I'm gonna let y'all get some questions in a bit, but I'm gonna get a bit specific, but at the same time, I do think it has overlaps with each other. Well, before I get specific, actually, you did just say great view behind you, and that also raised the flag for me, because we're talking about being Black and queer, navigating academia, and everybody talked about needing to go away. First of all, that was one thing, and finding their space, and also finding space even within their space, whether even if they feel they were not close to home or in the house per se. I would do that as well. And I want to know what was happening outside that kept you surviving academia. You know, who are those people? You know, community. How did community keep you going when you were surviving academia as a Black queer person?
Okay. So we have to think of the era, right? So, when have I been, let's say, single and queer and, trapped in some institution. This would have been the 90s, the early aughts, and then there was a period where I was married, you know, I had children, and then divorced, and then single again, and then after not a student anymore, but then, you know, a professor, single, and then trying to be queer, openly lesbian, and looking for romance, and living in central Pennsylvania, in a cursed little hamlet called State College, with one traffic light, I believe, was in that place, and where I had to travel, you know, at least 3 hours to get laid. You know, because, you know, you're on Tinder, but, you know, your students are on Tinder. And you have to make an announcement during class. If you see me on the apps, swipe left and mind your business. You can't go to the bars in town. Your students are at the bar. So it's just, you know, and, you know, it's also a space, it's rural, and, you know, if you're looking for, you know, a black woman, age appropriate, because you don't date students, you know, what are you going to do? So, you know, being queer, living openly queer, trying to have a well-rounded experience, I've had different phases of that. There was sort of the undergrad phase of, you know, being in the closet at home, but fully out and extremely active in, you know, queer organizations and stuff at college, but then having to sublimate all that when you got home. And then I had to leave the country. You know, I lived in Brazil for a few years, and I was able to openly, you know, live a queer life. I had my first live-in girlfriend and everything over there. Once again, I needed this distance. You do. I needed this distance to be whole and to feel whole, you know, but then not really feel whole because there's still parts of life missing because you can't mix them all. So it's just with time, with age, with maturity, with independence, with financial independence, I was able to fully kind of integrate everything. And this is also why I live so out and openly, especially, you know, if you pay attention to my shenanigans on Twitter, I talk about everything, right? I don't show every single thing. I still have a full-time job. I can't post about everything I do. However, all aspects of my life are covered in some way there. And I say that visibility is my ministry, right? I'm not a religious person. I'm not a believer in any kind of gods. However, I do have a vocation and a ministry, and that's to be an openly queer, openly lesbian, black woman who lives and loves openly, who mothers openly, proudly, who, you know, speaks and, you know, delves into intellectual critical discourse, who gets into mess and gossip, who curses, who uses extremely vulgar language openly, because I'm entirely whole. And it took a while. I'll be 50 next year. So it took a long while to get to where I am today. And I want people to see that this can be a thing. This is a thing. And if that's your path, this could be your thing.
I see my in terms of community, I feel like fostering that has been, as you said, fluid in my growth, and that is something that I actively am receptive to. And I say receptive to because I don't go out searching for things anymore. I think it's very important to understand that I am, as you said, like whole, and I feel very fortunate that I have come into this mindset like at a younger age, but I also been through a lot. Like I've seen a lot from a very young age, and I've had like my experience of friendships and relationships that I thought would fulfill me or help make me, and I think that they served their time for what they did, but also understanding that it's okay to curate like your taste in people. and community. And sometimes that's not always going to look the same. Understanding that there are give and take aspects of community. There are going to be things that you have to sacrifice and things that you overlook that do not cross your boundaries. Like, and let me really, things you overlook because people are people, but it should never cross your boundaries or your morality. Like, I'm not going to, I think it was really difficult for me, I'm gonna say, and specify, like, coming from a very purity culture, growing up in the church, having to like unlearn certain beliefs within myself, like even how I show up, but then applying that to other people. Like, I can't be that friend that's like, oh, why would you say that? Like, and there's some things where it's like, if someone says it, oh, I know we're not gonna be friends anymore because that's my line. But then there are aspects of it that have really prompted me to question, where is that coming from, and to grow within that. And so building community has been allowing myself the space to get to know people and to be an inconvenience at times. And I say this specifically because I was a hyper independent individual. And I say was because I'm really trying to let that go, like I really am. And I didn't like receiving help. I didn't like people like having to be there for me because it made me feel like I didn't have my stuff together. And a part of community is really allowing people to show up for you, like see you be vulnerable and know like we can be there for you. And as someone who likes being there for other people, you have to get to know like yourself. You have to really allow yourself to be receptive to help and to grow and learn from what was. So that's been like very, and this is something like I've just been discovering about myself like over the last year and a half, because this is the most help I've ever had to ask people, and it's been like a change. It's been a change that I at first did not enjoy, but now I've been really appreciative of, because it's opened me to so many more connections, and allowed me to get to know people on a more personal level, a more intimate level. And I now really think of the word intimacy. I think intimacy spoken of in a cultural context tends to have to do with sexuality and romance, but it can also be just with, it can be platonic. It could be within sisterhood. And really, like, I was fortunate, like, I had my sibling who ended up coming with me, who joined me at the university, and he ended up living with me for a year. And I never think that I would be living with my brother at one point in my life. But it was such a nice experience because I got to learn more about like his thought process and how he viewed the world, which then allowed me to be more receptive and open to the Black male experience. I'm not a Black man. But then meeting more queer Black men and understanding their experience and knowing that I cannot meet them, but I can hold space for them and I can be receptive to a different way of life, and that even opening me up to more of my identity and being exposed to specifically like ballroom culture has allowed me to be more sensual, and I would even argue express my femininity more. Whereas before, like a lot of people, when they think of exploring their femininity and learning their femininity, it's always this conversation between like elder women and girls. But coming from like a very church background, I was taught respectability politics. Even when I did, like I was definitely not the like always wanting to wear skirts type of girl. Like I was like, sometimes I went through phases like of fashion. I only want to wear pants, I don't want to wear certain tees, or, you know, sometimes I was like just very quirky and different, like in however I express myself and allowing that to be. But I feel like really valuing like the fluidity of expression by meeting various groups of queer people is what allowed me to like become more comfortable with myself and know that the spectrum is valid. I don't have to exist in a monolith of myself. And that was really important for me because you can have chosen family, you can have chosen community, and that has been a doorway to expanding my mind. And then, like I said before, travel. Like, travel has really been a community for me because I've been introduced to so many different cultures and ways of life that have really created a critical lens of evaluation for my belief systems of what I thought was and what is possible. So, going to different Afro-descendant communities, Latin communities, and even white communities. Like living in Spain for 6 months was not like she was not it for me. But I learned so much about myself and being around a group of people that didn't look like me, and how you could be treated differently in those environments. Like the European lens and an American lens are different. The way that they approach their way of life is different. And the tools that I learned there, I still was able to take care of. Like wanting to live in a more walkable city, wanting to be able to have grocery stores that are closer to me. I learned that from being in Spain. I learned that from being in Colombia. I learned that from being able to participate in these cultures that shared themselves with me. And now those are communities that live in my memories, that live in my extension of communication, participation of their culture, being able to explore tile painting and cenote like drives and going to like on hikes. Like I didn't think I was an outside person until I started traveling. Like I'm outdoorsy. I like taking hikes. I like going to the mountains and letting the rain touch my skin when I have a protective hairstyle. You know? But those are aspects of community that I learned through being receptive. And so that's what I would really say. Learn to just be receptive and have discernment. Listen to like your intuition, to what really drives you, motivates you, and be willing to grow. Because the growth might be uncomfortable, but change is never comfortable. Like it's never going to be like this thing of ease. It is challenging you in a new way. Community might challenge you, and it might not look the same as what you knew it to be, but you get to create it for yourself. And I also I just want to shout out to me. I love shouting me out because I am a community for me. I do have external community as I share, and I wanted to emphasize that first, but I have also fostered a community within myself, with my practices and my routines, journaling. I be talking to myself, and I know some people might be like, that's crazy, but you need to talk to yourself. Like you need to really understand how you think and your thoughts and reevaluate them and give yourself acknowledgement, because you can't always expect others to show up for you if you can't show up for yourself. Like community starts with you.
I think that for me, Black women have carried me through, like through and through. I think that it just so happened that like I came across some pretty powerful women who have like given me community, or who have like been there as a support system, from my mother to my best friends to people, colleagues, and peers. It's always been Black women who have like showed up for me in those spaces and who have supported me, whether I know them or not, like on a personal level. And they've always like have given me a space of like what I would say divine intervention, honestly. But I think between that, between having Black women in my life to support me queer in my life, also played a huge role in like kind of surviving academia, to have the space to go out and to fully like embrace who I am, to experiment, to show up in different faces or in different ways of existence. I think that I found release in going to those spaces to like kind of like exhaust my body out when I felt like I wasn't able to And so, and although, like, to be very fair, like, these were predominantly white spaces, so I'm still somewhat in this realm of being a spectacle, and a fetish, but I've found a way to kind of, like, find a pocket for myself to really, to, like, expand. I think that was that space, those nightlife spaces, from the dancing to the community, those spaces really gave me an opportunity to, like, kind of, like, retreat from, like, the sort of, like, hard iron fist that the academic institutions kind of, like, put on top of, or this weight. So I think that, between having spaces to dance and, the occasional flings, and having my sisters really be there to talk to see me in my queerness and my totality, like, I think that I've been seen in those spaces by those people, so that's what's kind of aided me in surviving academia. I don't think I would have been able, honestly, to be mentally sane had I not had those spaces and those people to, like, really guide me, and to support me, like, you're not crazy, you're not unreasonable, you're not, like, to have a space to, like, really figure out who I am, was really important. And I think that, those spaces really made an impact.
Thank you all.
I wanted to also highlight the importance of virtual community, right, and virtual spaces. So especially those of us who did this academic journey in very geographically isolated places, it was critical to be able to reach across social media and other virtual places like forums. And y'all, I've been on the internet since 1996. Okay. We all weren't even born in 1996. So just to, and it started with, like, message boards, ICQ, like, it was AOL, chat rooms, like, things like that. And I've gone through waves of what it means to have virtual community, right? I was there when, MySpace was happening, and then Facebook and stuff. So it's so important to know that, and I'm sure you all realize this, that it's not always people you see in person that are critical to your survival, especially if you're a minority within a minority within a minority. So it is so important that we understand that our virtual friends and our virtual community also constitute what is meaningful to us and what keeps us grounded and what keeps us functioning, right? Not always sane, but at least functioning in as much as we can. And I wanted to just highlight that.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. Also, I just appreciate how all of you guys answer questions in your own different ways so much. Wow, y'all are getting a treat, But that said, I do want to give us a little respite just to, do our libations, consume if need be, pass water, whatever bathroom breaks y'all need, take some, take a second to reset. Do we have a chime check? It's 8:05, okay? So you guys have 5-6 minutes. And I'm gonna ask my specific questions to each of y'all. And it's gonna take, they're specific, and then it's gonna be one last question for each of them. I think I might just go through it, let you think about it, all the questions after the break, and then we'll go over, and then we're just gonna share, we're all gonna get together, okay?
Can you share the questions now so I can think about it when I'm back on break?
Okay. I'm trying to think of what order. Okay, so, Doctor, Professor, Anya. I gotta put them both sometimes in, because we don't know what's gonna get clipped, and we need to know that it's both, okay? There's like 2 questions. I feel like we have a lot of questions. I feel like we all have questions about this. How did you meet your partner? 1.
On Twitter.
Okay.
Sorry.
That goes right with what you said before, right? Okay, but to that point, just reflect. When you come back, we want you to share with us some of your reflections on your partnership, what it means to navigate academia with an academic partner also. And also, how that is to also, like you said, be a visible lesbian mother.
Yeah.
I do want to hear a bit about that. Ajani, I wanna see, because I don't know if you know, but Ajani has mentioned in the past, you described your partner, and you mentioned they could maybe possibly be a professor.
Yeah, so essentially that question came up because of our conversation and me saying my dream life.
Mm-hmm.
My
Like,
dream ideal life, a black professor, I know is like going to be my future life.
exactly, and to that point,
You know.
but to that point, we have an inspiration right here in the building with us, but I also want to touch on that bi to lesbian pipeline, that bi to full spectrum pipeline, and I just want you to reflect a bit on that.
Buy now, gay later.
That part, like, tell me about how that came to be. You know, the journey is always journeying, you know what I mean? And we all have our own. Sometimes we know, like, I had this point, I said I came out when I came out the womb. I didn't know that I knew it. And that's okay, right? So how did all of that, your experience in academia, foster or not foster that? Think about that for me. London, Professor Williams, right? I'm kind of still in the community touch though with you, but more with people in your field. Whether it be your peers at school or those that you see as mentors. How have they impacted positively or negatively your experience? I know you talked about that one professor. But what does it mean also to see that mentorship in your field? Queerness, blackness, I know there's intersections along all of those. Can you tell us about that a little bit? So those are my questions for y'all. Tell us a bit about what it means to be a professional black lesbian wife. Tell us what it feels like, how that experience is, that journey on that spectrum, and tell us a little bit more about what it means to navigate community when we do need that representation, especially in such a finite considered field as yours. To be back. And y'all better have some questions ready too, okay? Because we're gonna have to get into it, because I know there's gonna be thick and potent. We'll be right back, stream. We'll be back, stream.
Yeah.
Gather around, y'all. We're about to get back into it. Bring your eats, bring your bevs, and bring your hearts.
It's already here.
Okay, class is back in session. If you hear my voice, clap once. If you hear my voice, clap twice. If you hear my voice, clap 3 times. Okay, Miracle said I gave professor tonight, so I'm channeling it now. Okay, we're back. Welcome back to the Queer Quarterly, y'all. Welcome from the commercial break. Again, we are here with our amazing panelists, Dr. and Professor Anya, Ajani, Zanaya, and Professor, up-and-coming Professor, Dr. Pierre Williams. And I had a specific question for each of y'all. Just to give the topic again, I was asking you to just touch on some of your experience as a spouse, partner, entrenched in academia. Hey Johnny, I wanted to hear about some of your experience with the spectrum and journey of the queer pipeline, discovery pipeline. And London, I wanted you to talk a little bit about, your niche, what it is to navigate your niche within your field as a Black queer artist to that young artist that is watching. So y'all get into it. And if you have anything to share with any other touch points, I know we got some overlapping visions and what have you, please feel free.
Sure. The pipeline is definitely overlapping for me because I'm of that, buy now, gay later stream. And that, I have loved women all my life. And, when I was coming into just sexuality in general and sexual attraction, I noticed boys and girls. But then I was only able to fully explore then bisexuality in college and beyond. And eventually, there was a lot of pressure once I hit a certain age, especially on the family side, to get married and have kids. And I always had trouble with attraction to men. And it was few and far between that I would find one. But I knew the assignment. I had to get married and I had to have kids. And I wanted to as well. So I was very excited when I met a man that I liked and I was sexually attracted to and I was excited about, and I held on to him. And it was a happy life, it was a loving life. And, you know, we made 2 wonderful kids, and, you know, the marriage lasted until it didn't. And about 15 years to be specific. And the last 5 years of that was an open marriage, open to us, but not open publicly, because, you know, I could be publicly queer, but not publicly an adulterer. And it was made open because I told my husband that I wanted women, and I wasn't going to live anymore without women, and romantic and passionate involvement with women. And he said, well, why break up this whole marriage? Just, you know, if you want women, go date women. And he also went and dated, and, you know. And that was supposed to kind of quench my thirst type of thing, but it inflamed it even more, and made me realize that this was the lucky one in 20 years that I wanted to be with, and that ultimately my life project was going to be with women. And I eventually divorced and came out publicly, not just as bisexual or queer, and what I've been calling myself, you know, before I came out as a lesbian. And then so this was around 2017, you know, and I ventured into lesbian dating, you know, what they call later life lesbian. They have a title for everybody. And that's what I became, or was called, and I was trying to do that as an academic. I was already working at that time, and also at that time living in State College, Pennsylvania. And it was very difficult. So my online life became very public in my including the fact that I was single and looking. So I would always, you know, talk about going on speed dating adventures. I would always get into, they used to have Twinder or something, Tinder, where you would post your ad and Relly would forward it, or, you know, retweet it for everybody to see. So I went into that. So I had profiles and everything. And people were watching, and, you know, people were interested. You know, people were, you know, hitting me up in the DMs and stuff like that. And I also was going in the DMs and whatnot. I never really got that into Instagram. Twitter was always kind of more my place. And my now wife, Dr. Alum, who's also a professor, recently promoted to full professor.
Congratulations, Dr. Ray.
See, my chic. And she was also looking, you know, and she was noticing that and I also noticed her a little bit. We were, you know, replying on each other, retweeting each other, things like that. And that was back when Clubhouse was a thing for a minute. Y'all remember Clubhouse?
Yeah.
You know, so we did Clubhouse rooms, and I organized this panel on Clubhouse on lesbians, and I invited her to come and talk. And I used it basically as a platform to interview her about dating. I was asking her all these questions, and we were talking about social class and lesbian relationships, and, you know, how do you navigate dating from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so I was doing all that, and eventually we got invited. This was at the height of lockdown, right? So no one was really going anywhere. Our lives were very much online, and we got invited to some kind of meeting for activism and on Zoom. And I hit her up on chat and Zoom. You know, they hadn't disabled the chat. I was very happy because the meeting was boring as fuck. And I was interested in other things besides the topic of the meeting. I don't even remember now. I saw Siri was there. I'm like, hey girl, what's going on? And I invited her to my own personal Zoom afterwards. Gave her my link, and, you know, she came on the link, and we started to really, really chat. After that, we had a few virtual dates, and then finally, when things opened up a bit, she was working at Lehigh University at the time. I was at Penn State. We were 4.5 hours between each other, and we met in Harrisburg for our first date. You know, in the middle, in between. And I had to rush back home because they had stormed the Capitol or something at the time. It was January 6th and whatnot. I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be anywhere near any seat of government at this time when white people are losing their fucking minds. I need to go home. Or else I would have spent the night in Harrisburg, to see what this is all about. But we started, and we did the long distance thing. And I was very open and honest with Siri that, I cannot do long distance. I've already done long distance. 2 years, I was dating a woman in DC. I had to, 3.5 hours, 4 hours, twice a month. And I'm like, no, I can't do all this driving anymore. I want local love. Plus, I had gotten the CMU job. CMU may act like they don't know me now, but they recruited me for this job. Back in the George Floyd era when everybody needed a black friend, I was recruited. Principally because of my positions and openness and outspokenness about criticality and blackness, etc. I'm like, look, I'm moving to Pittsburgh. It's going to be even further. This thing can't work. And she's just like, it's not impossible. Right? Next thing I know, she goes and gets a job in Pitt and buys a house in Pittsburgh. And a year after that conversation, we were local, and of course she went on Twitter and she was just like, if this woman says there's any other impediments between, against our love, it ain't gonna be distance because I'm here. And she shut me up like, good, But it was lovely. She came and we were both, professoring at our institutions and dating locally and loving locally. And I had 2 kids. She also has 1 daughter. And yeah, eventually she proposed. And I said yes. We got married. We moved in together, blended our homes, blended our lives. We now have this beautiful family of 5. And we're doing that thing as married women, as black professors, living and loving. I don't know what else to say except I'm living the fucking dream now.
Class, repeat after me. If they wanted to, they would.
They would and they will.
Yes.
They will.
If they wanted to, they will.
When they will and they'll want to.
Indeed.
Thank you. Before we move on, motherhood. Interesting. So, another thing that I do, I live and love publicly. I also mother very publicly. So, I come online to talk about my kids. We go on these journeys. I talk about my children. My daughter has a wicked sense of humor. She's the funniest child. So I talk about things like, and very young, at like age 7 or 8, she told me she had 2 enemies. I had 2 enemies. You have 2 enemies. What are you talking about? So I went on Twitter to talk about my child's 2 enemies. It was the kid that used to bully her in school, and it was the other one that ate his sausage in front of her when hers fell on the ground at the cafeteria. That's an enemy. Like in her face. So she was talking about things like, my son went on his first date, we talked about that on Twitter, and we talked about how I was teaching him how to cook, little videos and stuff about it. And also, some difficult conversations about, there was a time when my daughter was having difficulty with her father's stinginess. And, we talked about how, it comes from a place of trauma and a place of really not having and always needing to really hold tight to money because you haven't had that much of an experience of, having a lot of it.
try to negotiate that and kind of hold space for my daughter to be mad about things that she feels she wants from her dad and can't get, and also complicated things like that. We talk about sex, talk about my children navigating dating and things like that. So I talk about the fact that we should not beat children. There should not be violence in our homes, and especially against the most defenseless people in our homes. And so I get a lot of hatred and criticism from homophobic people that believe that I should not be raising children, that I'm a bad example for children, that the mere fact that I live openly and love openly as a lesbian, that this disqualifies me. This makes me just outright a bad mother, so I have to struggle against issues like that. I have to struggle against the deeply offensive and just nasty and untrue insinuation that just being gay or trans means that we're pedophiles somehow, that we hurt children and we sexually exploit children just off the bat, just being who we are and inhabiting our identity. So I battle against that, and I talk about experiences related to that. For example, there was a woman who had a young child that was experiencing homelessness because she was running away from an abusive husband, and Siri offered this woman a place to stay, like in Siri's own home, and so she, for a few months or whatever, so she could get things together. And the woman rejected the offer, saying, well, if I didn't have a child, I would take you up on this offer, but I don't want to expose my child to you. So the insinuation wasn't an insinuation, it was an outright statement that because we were lesbians, that we would, somehow abuse the child or touch it, I don't know what. So I battle against these assumptions, these insinuations. And I battle against them by being open and living openly and showing how, the challenges I have with motherhood, like everybody else, but also the successes, the great triumphs I have with motherhood, and showing the challenges my children have and the successes that they enjoy as well. Because we have that right to parent. And we also have an obligation to parent the way we were not parented, by the way, right? The fact that I was not open and comfortable enough. My mother died without me opening my mouth and saying who I was to her because of the kind of household that she had where I could not say that. And I'm doing very differently with my own children. They can be absolutely who they want to be, who they are, in their entirety, in their wholeness, and they will be loved regardless. And because of their wholeness and who they are, not in spite of it. So that is another thing that I believe in doing. As part of my visibility ministry is to mother openly, showing, and mother with another woman, and show that we do it. We have the right to do it. We do it well, successfully, and we can also be a model for everybody. Not just queer parents, but everybody who wants to parent. And we can also be sort of a safe space emotionally for people who wish that they had homes like we have when we're providing for our children.
Thank you for that. Thank you for existing. Frankly. Do either of y'all have thoughts about your questions or like to jump into it first?
I have to process what you said. Like that last sentence really hit me because that directly correlates to my queer experience and my queer journey. environment that loves you for who you are, not despite it, and wants what's best for you, but also is genuinely interested in you, like as an individual, your interests, not just your performance. Some of this is gonna be like things I thought about, and some of this is like, as I say it, we're going to be coming through discovery together. Because I am truly like of the mind that when you talk things out, like it's for y'all and it's for me sometimes. Because when I think about performance, when I think about performance and existing in a household where I was rewarded for my performance, that contributed to how I saw my identity for quite some time. And the fact that people think that queerness is a performance, and not to say that there's aspects of aesthetics that aren't performance, because performance is a part of every cultural expression. But the fact that people think that performance of queerness is something that you can turn off anyway. So, also, let's take a real pause real quick. One of the things that I will be continuing studying in my academic journey is media, arts, and performance. So like, this is going to be things that like I discuss frequently and how it relates to my life. And clearly it's an inspiration. But when I think about my upbringing and my introduction to queerness in the household, I can joke and I can tell you like what Macklemore said when I was in the third grade, my dad thought I was gay, which was actually like a really interesting confrontation because it was more like, why that girl draw you that picture? Is she gay? You need to throw it in the trash. And I was like, what? One, what is the correlation? Like, because someone drew me a picture, that doesn't automatically mean we are now in a lesbian relationship. Like, I don't know what you think, but like that doesn't make sense. At least I'm in the third grade. Like, I'm in the fourth grade. I don't know that. What? I can't get a picture from my friend. I was livid. Oh, I was livid. And I already told y'all I spoke my mind as a kid. So I was like, instead of being like, I'm not gay, I was like, what's wrong with gay people? And my father, it led to a conversation of more like the disownment of being gay. And I distinctly remember like we're driving, like I'm in the backseat, he's driving. And I'm like, so you would disown me if I was gay? And essentially he said yes. And so my response was like, saying that to your 8-year-old daughter is crazy. Like, I was not really, and I can laugh about it because and that's why I say radical mind. Like, I really acknowledge and I uplift my inner child because I am who I am and I've always been who I've been because of my dedication to confrontation and holding systems accountable, including my family. And I know that was hard. I know it was hard to grow up in a place like that where people want you to be quiet and people don't want you to speak your mind. And for me to be 8 and being like, oh, you're crazy. Like, yeah. So let's start there because it's important. Having a confrontation like that at such a young age, I really feel like psychologically impacts you to either rebel against it or to lean into it. And I already felt like my life was like hard enough. So I'm like, I'm not really interested in exploring like this queerness when I have other things to focus on, like my education. And so what I spoke to in the past of just like, I'm already trying to surviving academia. Like I'm literally trying to survive in my everyday. I was a low income child, like single mother essentially. Like, yes, my dad he exists, but he wasn't like present and active in my life. He lived in a whole different state. And so like the moments that I did get to spend with him, like that idea of someone telling me that they wouldn't want to claim you as their own because of an extension of your personality or your existence, like, really was absurd to me, because I'm like, you're not even around enough to tell me. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna crack up, because, like, that's real. Like, you're not even around me enough to say whether or not this is a real experience for me and to claim me. Like, I need you to be active first, and then we can have a conversation about it. And even then, it's like, why wouldn't you want, like, your firstborn daughter, why wouldn't you want to be a part of her life? And that's like a whole separate conversation. But going through all of those experiences and being introduced to relationships from a external perspective, like, I didn't have like healthy relationships in my family that I looked to. And I say that simply because, like I said, I'm the first woman in my family to go to school and graduate, the first to reach this age with no kids, to live on my own. My mom had me at 19, and I look at those systems and I question them. And what do I make of that for like myself? And what do I see for myself? And quite oftentimes, when I looked at romantic relationships, I looked at it from opposition. Like, this is what I don't want, instead of what do I want. I saw a lot of age gap relationships in my family because they were older and they like to say that's the times. And I personally, that's not something I aspire to have. I don't want to be 7, 12 years different, my partner. I want us to like have similar upbringings and understanding the toxic patriarchal nature of like why they even had to get in those relationships in the first place really like impacted like my positioning of relationships. So let's start with that groundwork. So growing up, I did have crushes, and I felt like oftentimes, yes, my crushes were boys, but it also felt like a forced limerence, like an obsession, almost like of the only other black boy in my class. Like all the girls in my class were friends. Why would I have a crush on them? And not to invalidate people who go through that experience, because I think that's real, but I did very much value my friendships as sisterhood. So for me, it was like, because you're my sister, I'm not looking at you that way. So the only other person that looks like me that I could have this crush on is this other boy in my class. And quite often, like when I reflect on it now, it just felt like something I thought I had to do. Not necessarily like a space of, oh, like I like your personality. It's just like, oh, like you're the other black kid in class. Other people have crushes around this age. I'm supposed to have a crush on you. And I genuinely enjoy intellect and conversing. So I found myself attaching my feelings and emotions to like those deeper intellectual conversations I was having with the men in my life or the boys in my life. And being someone who was more STEM oriented early on, who lived in a very rural area, they do not always push young women to explore their academic passions. So I oftentimes was in classes as the only black girl, and if it wasn't humanities, it was predominantly boys. So the one black boy, of course, I'm like, oh yeah, like we're having like these deep conversations, I love talking to you, and all of a sudden I have a crush. And every time I would explore that crush more, it crushed my heart. Like it was like, oh, this is it. And I say that to say, like, freshman year of college, I ended up in this relationship with this young man, and we were both very passionate about psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy. Like we would have like these really passionate, in-depth conversations, and I loved it so much. And I could tell like our connection and our chemistry was there, and I do not deny that. But I remember like getting deeper into our relationship, like it's like a year and some change in, and he's talking about he's talking about futures. Like, you know, I can see us down the line getting married. I'm like, whoa, hold up. I don't think we need to talk about that. Like, that, I don't see that right now. But like now when I analyze it, I never imagined myself being a wife of a man. I never like wanted like in theory I wanted a wedding. Like I grew up watching like all of the productions of it. Like I thought I wanted like this marriage, but I really just wanted to throw a wedding. Like I'd be a great event planner. Let's be so for real. It's going to be fabulous. But the like every single time I've dated men, I've always just felt like something's missing. And so now, like even in my queerness, I say I like who I like. I don't necessarily like force myself to hold to a certain label because I feel like that can be damaging for me. Because I do have attraction to some men. Most of the men I have attraction to are they're sexually fluid. They're
Butch queen.
Give it up.
Sugar in the tank.
or those who haven't confronted their sexual. I feel like I always end up with like those men who haven't really confronted their sexuality fully. Like, and that's not to say that men have to exist a certain way and like they can't be straight. I really want to set the tone there. But a lot of the men that I dated were getting allegations. You know, like I do not like the toxic masculine. Like actually, that repulses me. Like the more that you are a macho man, the more I'm like ew. And like so when I started really analyzing that, I was like, okay, like clearly, like I really just love like an intellectual like connection. I love being able to like really converse and like emotional. I like emotional stability, even though like we need to work on that as a collective. And it got to a point then when I had my first girlfriend that really like changed my whole life. And I dated women before that, like, and it was because of a conversation I had with my first college boyfriend, where I was just like, yeah, I don't know, like a part of me really wants to explore like my connection with women. The idea of me going to college and it's like, oh yeah, I meet my boyfriend in college and then we get married. Like that's what you try to do. Like that scares me. Like that sounds like a personalized hell. And I didn't realize at the time, like that was like the queerness in me being like, hey, like maybe this is not you. But I didn't know what that was for me. And so like really like analyzing it, being able to explore more connections with women romantically, dating apps was like okay. But like I live in Pittsburgh and I'm not one, like I am picky with my gay. Like I am. I don't just like, and I think that's really important to say because I think people assume of queer people like you just like all queer people, like y'all queer, like why don't y'all go together? Like she like girls, now kiss. No! Like we might not even get along. We might not even have the same views on life. But anyway, I say that because going to my university, and I already told y'all like the background of it was very like homophobic, especially within the Black community. I can't say my tagline here, but if you want to hear what my tagline is, you gotta come up to me and ask me. Because I do prefer to date Black women. Like I feel like I am a Black radical. I believe in the liberation of Black love. I don't think that people have to limit themselves to that, but the love that I imagine for myself is of the Africana diaspora. They don't have to be Black American, but I do think like that is something that I really appreciate, and I am attracted to Black women. Like, I mean, how could you not? So, for me, if I'm already in a university that doesn't really have Black women, and then the majority of the black women on the university aren't openly queer, like that limits my dating experience. But when I went abroad, I did meet some people, like we had like nice interactions, and I came back, I met my first girlfriend at the time, and I realized there were feelings that I felt that I never felt with men, like ever. And to this day, cause I tried, like after breaking up, you know, I was like, okay, let me see like if I like men for real. And like they're cool, like they're nice to talk to sometimes, like, but there was just an aspect of it that I only feel that connection when I'm talking with women. And I think to connect it back to the performance aspect, so much of me was performing when I was with men that I didn't realize that there wasn't a intimate connection that went beyond what I thought was possible. So if you're always being modeled like a certain type of relationship or expectation of love, and you think that's all it can be, but I feel like I'm settling, and I can't explain it. I can't hit I can't hit the nail on the head, because it's like, it's not a bad relationship. Like, I'm being treated well, but it's just something missing. And to know, like, that is okay to feel those feelings and to validate it. And now it's like, okay, like, some people could say I'm pansexual. People could say I'm queer. Maybe, like, you know, I might be down here, you know, later on and be like, yeah, no, actually, I'm a lesbian in a couple of years. But I acknowledge now that, like, I prefer dating women. I do have attraction to men, and those are okay. And I don't have to explore my attraction to men, because I think we can accept that attraction in general is a very natural thing that we do not have to act on all the time. But if I'm not being fulfilled in my relationships with men, and I always feel like something is essentially missing, it is okay for me to also just be like, I just prefer dating women. And I really emphasize like the not labeling for me, because I think I don't even want to have to hold myself to the pressure of performing for a label in general. So I genuinely like the word queer. Like, I genuinely like being perceived as queer. I like who I like, because I don't want to limit myself from love that is possible, that I'm putting behind a label, when in reality I am in, I don't want to say I'm in search, because I'm not, but like I am in desire of a connection with a specific soul. Like, I know like the souls that I like. I know like the type of feelings I want to feel in my partnerships. And for me, the limitation begins at labeling. And I know that's different for everyone. Some people feel empowered by labels, and I respect that, and I applaud that. But exploring like what you like personally is essential to understanding who you are. And I just happen to be someone who, like, you know, men can be cute, and then women just, yeah, like, they're everything.
Thank you so much for walking us through that. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Williams.
Okay, I'll preface this by saying, like, a lot of what I'm about to say is like kind of a conversation with Low London a little bit. I going through school and with something that's very specific and niche with art, you know, there is a quote by Carrie James Marshall when he's talking about, he's a painter. He talks about how there will never be enough Black artists to combat all of the whitewashing that has happened in our history. There will never be enough. There will always be more that needs to be there in that history. And I remember before I left for college, I had this conversation with my grandfather about a Canadian Wiley painting that I was so ecstatic about. It's what got me into painting. And I was like trying to push to go to this art museum in Milwaukee with him. Like, I really want you to see this painting. And he laughed and chuckled and he looked at me and he said that those spaces aren't for us. Like those like, black people don't go to these art museums. And that would foreground my college experience, like to a T. Like going through school and having like such an interest and a desire to make art, to think about conceptualize art, to want to create things that don't exist, or creating spaces that don't, like, I've never even been conceptualized for myself, you know. I went into art school bright-eyed and open to finding experiences that were, I guess, escapism from a lot of the things that like I have had to like go through like within childhood or even like adolescence and teenage years. And that being said, though, you know, going through school, like I had like I was confronted with a lot with my identity politics. It was something that I was constantly aware of in this space, constantly being the only black person in a room, having critiques and conversations where people did not engage with my work. People felt like they couldn't say things, or because they didn't want to say the wrong things, they said nothing, or because they felt like this didn't apply to their life, you know, they didn't have anything to say. When, you know, I'm forced to talk about all these white people all day long. Like, I'm forced to engage and have critical analytical conversations about work that has been, you know, in a sense, whitewashing history for the most part. And so I leaned on the little bit of mentorship that I had from black men and women who came into my life by proximity, and some of my peers. Now, when you asked me this question, I was really trying to think about like the positives and the negatives, like with both having mentors and peer relationships. And I think I struggle thinking about my peer relationships because I think that I did not make a lot of connections with people who were in my immediate space because of, in the sense, from what I can recognize now, is the power that I held. I think people who I came across didn't really understand like where it came from, or I didn't even understand where it came from in the sense of like the passion and the power that I have in my hands and the talents that I've been blessed with. And that caused a lot of isolation for me. Like I mentioned earlier, like, you know, when it came to like professors doing research, that filling up in the holes where, you know, we're talking about Foucault and Picasso and all these Francis Bacon, these artists that like are prolific and that are making great things and intellectually stimulating, but like are not talking about my experience. I don't see myself in these works. I don't see myself in these theories. And in fact, I kind of feel like I'm being pushed out even further. And like it takes me more time to like decode information or to like figure out how like I can wedge myself into places. And I think that something that, you know, came along with that like was this validation that like I was seeking in these spaces, to try and be, not to constantly want to be like acknowledged, or like, you know, like to seek that pat on the back. And it's embarrassing to like to think about because I wish I could have just like been, I wish I could have had someone to tell me like, you don't need that like that's not something that like you have to have in order to be great, or to like consider yourself great, to move it throughout that space. And so I think my relationships with my peers was difficult because it's no shade, but I was kind of light years ahead of a lot of people, and I was in my own lane. I was even like, not even to compare like where I was as far as like in my practice or how I was thinking about art, but I was forced to carve out my own space in every place that I went. Every professor that I had, every class that I went to, I had to make space for myself to reroute and to assess the curriculum to fit what I needed for the time, because it wasn't being provided for me. So it kind of, I had a lot of like, I had a few, very, very few, small handful of artists and peers who created a great influence in my life, and helped me think outside of like this sort of like insular space that I was like kind of forced to be in. And then I had peers who, you know, spoke negatively and like kind of like didn't really see it for my work or didn't choose to, or even like the training that I had or the lack thereof. You know, I'm a gay boy from the hood, like who came to art school and, you know, kind of turned it. And I think that, you know, you have people who are attracted to that, who want to see you grow, but then you have a lot of people who don't want to see that flourish and don't really want to see these representations, who try and downplay your work. And I think that that was something that I didn't realize. I think I went into art school kind of just like, this is gonna be like my gay utopia. Like I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna like live and find all types of, you know, love and joy and celebration. But I think what came was like a really hard realization that like this world is really like not designed for people like me, who look like me, who are identify as me, who like are parallel to me. It's not designed for us. And so that was something that like I had to like really, I learned from my peers and the relationships I've attained. Now my mentors, ooh child. I've had some really great mentors and I've had some really shitty mentors. I've had people who have given me so much to live with, so many things to think about, to engage with in myself, and life lessons that will forever stick with me. And I've also had people who have taken advantage of my gifts, who have seen the potential in me and have, in spite of, tried to like diminish or suffocate what I was doing. And I think that, you know, I was able to discern for myself what I needed, what was useful, and what I needed to like get rid of and to empty. And that in itself was something that I'm still figuring out. I'm still like learning how to like hear, like to take in things, but also to not like let them affect me as much, or to be able to let things slide off me, or to intake and like hold on to things that I know that are moving me. And so I think that for me, mentorship is difficult. You know, I found myself like even performing mentorship to my peers and to my chosen family, to students, to adults who are older than me. Like I've been so timid about like mentoring others or to give advice, and even when I give advice to people, I'm very like kind of like, hey, like this is purely from my experience and from what I have learned, and if I can like shed light and like kind of tell you about what I experienced to help you guide or like give an influence, I want to. But I think that like I'm hesitant because I know that like what I've been through with mentors who have given me half-baked or you know, perpetuating narratives onto me. And so I think a lot of that relationship between mentors and peers have been a lot about thinking about like who, like asserting who I am and understanding that like validation like needs to come from the self. That there is a world that I can create and bend to my will. I don't really have to allow anyone else to tell me who I am. I think that, you know, in art school, there's like this whole like room of silence that a lot of Black people experience because there isn't a lot of like conversations around like Black art or that's happening. And if it is, it's also sort of like this semi-weird fetish or this sort of like, you know, it was really cool when the Black Lives Matter things were going on. Everyone wanted to collect Black art, but now that Trump's, you know, in office now, people aren't really focused on that anymore. No one cares as much about Black creative work. You can see in the economy now, or like, you know, in the market, like people aren't concerned about it. And I think that like for me, having gone through the experiences I've had with my mentors and with my peers, I think I've like settled in my own, I've settled in with myself to really devote as much stability with like guiding my own like intuition, like being able to receive things, but also to be able to like pay stuff too. Like there's some things that like you just can't hold on to.
You get into the audience with pay means?
Oh, yeah, like you gotta just, you just gotta ignore stuff. Some things just like you have to like get rid of. It can't rest in your spirit. And I think, yeah, I've had some really, like, one of my mentors in Pittsburgh, Shakeith Kathy, has been a very, very, very influential, like I like to call him my gay dad, gay pops, very influential person on how to like maneuver in the art world, and you know, I've been so grateful to have certain opportunities to be brought in front of people, and to have someone like that to kind of show like what mentorship can look like, you know, what it can be, and like what role, what an important role that mentorship plays in that space too for emerging artists, or like, you know, young folk in general. It's important. It's important to like lead that, and if I can like give like a little bit of my own expertise, if that is, you know, I want to be able to share that. But I think that like, if I can, one thing I'll just end on, if I can talk to young artists, you know, there is a deep level of introspection that you have to have, a deep level of understanding of oneself, because if you go into this world like without that, like you'll fall for anything. You allow people to tell you like who you are and like what you need to do, rather than like focusing on like what it is that like you know you're meant to do. And I think that like going through art school, I have really learned how to like navigate my sense of self and leaning on my intuition and like allowing myself to be vulnerable, but to also like to protect that space for myself. So I think, yeah, like had some really great experiences, I've had some really bad experiences, but I think that like, you know, I want to see something different as far as like how, you know, communication amongst mentors and peers like operates. Like I want to be able to like change or like to navigate that with the few people that like I come across, or like interactions that I have with people. I want to be able to like make up for the things that like I necessarily didn't get to have. There's this thing that I used to joke. Well, we joked about it, but I had a group of friends. We started a Black Student Union at my undergraduate, and we were talking about like, you know, there were no HBCUs that like had like art. There's no art school that's like an HBCU. There's no like program that's like that or whatever. And like we had talked about like, oh, if we had all the money in the world, we would build an institution for us. Like it would that's what it would do. We would hire like get these artists to come in, and like, you know, I think that like as I like have gotten older, like I don't think that like relying on an institution to do that. That work can be done in your community now through those relationships, through those mentorships, through peer relationships, and like sharing that wealth to like generate more artists, to create more free thinkers and people that like need that and want to do different. Like, you know, I think that's a goal. I think that I've learned a lot from those experiences. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And to put a bit more weight on what Professor Williams was saying, you know, this insight about mentorship is so poignant considering he is such a powerful mentor without even needing the professor gig. A queen father and a gay father to a lot of up and coming fab young folks in this city. So thank you again for the work you do. I know we're coming up on time. Does anybody have a time check for me to supplement that comment? It's 9:10. I'm not giving you 15 minutes back of your time. It's not like that. We're not that close. But I do want to open it up if you guys have questions to really get into with our panelists before we, you know, release them. I don't want to put you on the spot. There are no stupid questions, I will say, but if you don't have a question, don't hurt yourself. We can still have more to talk about, but I do want to give time, you know. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, concerns, experiences they want to touch on to like get into it? Like we make it Socratic, I don't care. Yes.
How'd you guys navigate the
One second, boo. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna run you a mic. I'm coming. That is soldier. Give me this. I'm coming. Tell us your name, your pronouns. Everybody say hi, class. I'm joking, but you know this.
My name is Poetic. I am 22 years old, and pronouns, you can use any pronouns. My question was, how did you guys navigate that balance of protecting your peace, but also feeling the need to educate the ignorant people, like, for example, like professors, mentors, other peers?
generally not a peaceful person. It's not in my nature. I was born combative and rebellious and loudmouth, and so protecting my peace looks different for me. Protecting my peace is sort of like, I'm an extrovert, but with introvert tendencies, and then I burn out with a lot of the extroverted work that I do, especially public speaking and teaching, things like that. So protecting my peace would mean just seeking alone time, just in general. Protecting my peace also means transforming the places and institutions where I am, right? I don't like to be the only Black person anywhere. It's uncomfortable, it's upsetting, and do not ever trust any Black person that likes to be the only Black person. And there are some that are like, you know, like they get into it, they feel special. I feel that it calls too much attention to the evil in the world, and I want to help that, I want to change that. So I'm almost always trying to figure out how to Blackify wherever I am, whatever it is that's going on, and bring more people in, do more things that would make the place safer for us to be more of us. So that's a way of protecting my peace and kind of transforming the environments I'm in so they're not so hostile and isolated. And also, if any white person ever says to you that you're a good one, you're a good Black, you're a, you know, the other people, but you, I trust you. I don't like that either. I strive never to be the good Black anyway, right? I know I'm doing something right if they think I'm problematic. So protecting my peace is also about constantly being in the fight for justice for us in some way, however we can do it, because injustice is everywhere. So that's how I kind of define it. So it's not peace in the sense of tranquility, but peace in the sense of being in the kind of world that I would be comfortable inhabiting and creating that.
I am the queen or princess of protecting my peace. I'm not gonna lie. And that is from someone who has been such a warrior. Just to give you context, like my name literally means warrior. Like, and having to fight so much, you learn what's worth it. Like what battles truly deserve your time and your energy. And protecting your peace is going to look different. So I can't even tell you what that's gonna look like for you, but you gotta figure out what brings you peace and what you will draw the line in the sand in and stand on business about. Because sometimes finding and building peace is not going to always look peaceful in that moment. Sometimes you're gonna have to go through the discomfort of establishing boundaries and holding systems accountable in order to receive the efforts and the results for peace. Confronting people is not an easy thing, and oftentimes it's not going to be a peaceful thing if people do not perceive you as a peaceful person. And being a Black person is automatically assigned with anger and aggression. And so you are going to have to release like the tie of being a peacekeeper. That is not your responsibility. So like, if I were to answer the question for me, what really helped me is releasing the Black superwoman trope, like that I have to wear the cape, I gotta save them all. I don't gotta save them all. I'm not the hero of everyone's story. I can only really put me first and then assist in the upliftment and empowerment of those who care to share morality and ethics with me. I'm not going out of my way to educate people who choose to be ignorant. an emphasis on choose to be ignorant. And then when it does come to the education portion, it is not your responsibility to educate people. And if you would like to educate people, practice it by utilizing examples in your everyday life or of your influence, of your research as the standard. And what I mean by this is, someone made like a great comment or like statement, and I wish I could have credited them, but they were like, they built their heaven on earth and told you that yours is in the sky. Which essentially just means like they have streets and programs and buildings and all of these things named after them. So my favorite thing to do is I use Black examples. To put it in the gender context, there's this white lady who talks about how she uses like makeup products and references in order to explain business lingo, but she uses it actively like in her meetings with other white men. So constantly it's like them having to establish like an understanding or meet her where she's at rather than the other way. So like making a practice of really being like committed to your history and to your interests so much that you are like an expert and that becomes your standard. Like create the standard for you. So I'm not going to sit here and list like white artists. If somebody asks me who's the best artist, I mean they could be white, but I've had to spend majority of my life learning about white artists. So why would I not name the Black ones that had the most influential spot in my life? If I'm over here talking about countries that I visited, I'm not starting off with the white ones. I'm not. I'm not. And it's not to discredit those systems, but it's to really position perspective. And if you want to educate people, you got to assume that they already know. And when you want to educate people and assume that they already know, because people are either going to ask you more, or they're going to be so caught up in their ego that they will do the research on their own. You don't want to have to be the go-to person that's like, oh, well, you know, like, Ajani just does such a good job at explaining this that I think that we would just benefit from you explaining to the whole class, like, why Black lives matter. Why would I do that? Like, that's not something that I would want to be known for. And so just casually bringing these into your conversation is a great exercise to reinstate your power and your culture so that it becomes the norm, like it becomes the practice.
I agree with what was already said, so I'm not going to add too much, but what I will say is that, I have this belief, or this saying I think that a lot of people have passed down to me or whatnot, it's common, but like people are going to talk about you the day you die, so I don't really care about what people have to say about me personally. You can talk about me whatever you want, make it whatever, I know who I am at the end of the day, but when it comes to the people that I love and I support, totally a different ballgame. Like, I will not stand for anyone talking shit or slander about, Black women, Black trans women, Black queer community. That's something that I can't not be vocal about. And I even have to do some internal checking of things that I have to constantly unlearn. So I think protecting my peace looks like not allowing people to get me out of my character, but also when someone that I love and something that I believe and I stand for, I'm gonna rage. I'm willing to bring up bat and break off what I need to make my point known and to know that people need to be fought for and there needs to be acknowledging my privilege as a Black man in this world. There's things that I need to do to stand up for. So I think when it comes to educating others, I'm not afraid to put somebody in their place when they're saying ignorant shit about someone or a community that they have no idea that they're talking about, they have no idea about, or that they don't really have a proximity to, when you have opinions that really are harmful. that's when I feel like I like will make my way into the conversation. But I think it's about like picking your battles too. You know, there are gonna be people on this earth who just say shit to say things and to like perpetuate a lot of like things that like they inherit from their parents, from their friends, that they don't really have like real original thoughts and ideas. It's just lame. But I think that like it's important to like stand up for people who are under attack like actively, and things that are like happening that are harmful to our community and to like the people that like are supporting me. So
I also want to address that protecting your peace and standing up for people might not look like aggressive confrontation, because as people with strong personalities and a heightened sense of justice, like sometimes it's easier for some people than others. So a good way to practice it is figuring out like where your comfortability level is and meeting it there. So if you're not someone who's like, well, blah, 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 that's okay. Sometimes you gotta be one of those people to just like silent, like let the whole room get silent and just look them dead in their eye. That's like one of my favorite, like I've become so much quieter over the years because silence holds power. And you gotta really just like, and then if you really wanna like follow up with that, what do you mean by that? Can you explain your thought process of how you got to that conclusion? And where's your accredited sources? Like whenever it gets to that point where like you can't come out of character, because let's say like you have a job. Like say like your job is something like you are not able to risk, and you need to approach it in a more delicate manner. Start utilizing the same tools that are used against you towards them. Like, cause I'm not gonna name your experience, but I know that I've been in a situation where like if I'm the only black person and I say something, it's been like white silence, like the lack of acknowledgement of a thought. Sometimes you gotta do that to people. Sometimes you just gotta address it straight up. Like it's okay.
Thank you for the wonderful question, Poetics. You know, when I did that time check, never mind, we're over time. And I just want to thank everyone for coming again. London, Ajani, Professor Anya. Thank you so much. We're going to go now, okay? I believe that Anya got your email so we can share with the audience in case you have any other questions. But if you guys want to do any plug of anything of the sort, feel free to, because I'm going to do a plug. Once again, folks, Fridays on Deck will be happening on Fridays at East Liberty Green Park. If anybody needs a space to get into some greens, some music, and some food, there'll also be STI testing available there. On the 30th, the Saturday, we'll be having a back to school Kiki ball. So it'll also be a school supply drive for all those that have supplies to bring forth. It'll be here at 6 p.m. And then the Friday, the 29th, we'll be having an artist showcase as well. Her name is Ifoma. I don't remember her last name off the dome. But Friday at 6 p.m. So we have a couple events if you need something to do surrounding academia. So I'm obviously going to plug the back to school ball. I'll be commentating. Anybody have any other plugs they would like to share with the class before we go off, release into office hours or whatever it is we're released into?
You can find my website, ajisfits.com, ajisfits.com. It is the main point of my journey, and there's a lot more to come there, so subscribe to my newsletter, because we have to have our own systems outside of like Instagram and things like that. And then LinkedIn, I'm one of those people, I like LinkedIn, so if you want to contact me on LinkedIn, by all means, go ahead, book me for a chat, yeah.
I'm definitely on the socials. UJUANYA Anya, like everywhere. So wherever there's a social media, that's my handle there. And I'm not on LinkedIn. Never have been. If you see any Anya on LinkedIn, it's a fraud. I don't know anybody there. So yeah, that's it. Connect.
Okay, well, and with that, we thank you all for coming. Ball over. You don't have to go home, but you have to get out of here. Thank you for coming to Queer Quarterly. Tune in for Queer Quarterly 4, October 14th, okay? Have a good night, y'all. Yes, that was a long scene in my class. Good.